address the chapel council. If you'll stand and join me for the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing and pray with me. Lord God, first of all, just pause to say thank you for your many and abundant blessings, Lord. Thank you for life itself and for allowing us this opportunity to be a part of your creation during this day. Lord, I just ask that in all that we do tonight, we do it in a way that honors you. We pray in your holy name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so that brings us to public comments. We do have several public hearings tonight, so you could be signed up on one or more, or you just want to make sure everybody signed up for the right one.
Is there 3 of them?
Mm-hmm. There's 3 sheets.
Okay, so this is for general public comments, and all comments are limited to 3 minutes. The first on our list is Mr. William Rule. You'll come to the podium and state your name and address. Or Ruley,
That's fine. It's unruly. I'm not going to be really It's much different than the other guy. William Houston Ruley Jr. I live at 1015 Cuthbertson Road, and I come before you tonight. I really wanted to just take an opportunity to thank you for the evening that you gave us last month as neighbors that were concerned about 5 Stones. And I really want to thank you for calling them out for lying and for trying to cover up their deceit and for bringing that all to light. I really appreciate that. That shows a transparency. It goes in the same thing with the honesty and fairness that your mission says. Moving on to something more positive, though, we do appreciate the effort, and we're going to have Richard Stevens speaking to work on the light trespass issue, and that's better defined, and we appreciate your guidance on that. Y'all have been so helpful on several other issues that we have concerns with how to handle them and how to do it properly and orderly and correctly, and so we greatly appreciate that. I also wanted to pass around to you. Just real quick, and I'm going to get out of here, this is what you currently think the building looks like at 5 Stones? And just hold on to that thought. You don't have to answer me next month. I'm going to show you what the building looks like at 5 Stones. That was what was originally proposed, and it was changed right before the build in 2016. That's another time. Also, one last thing. We've been reading through the DOT reports that I know they're from 2014 and some of the other ones, and we don't notice any accidents, which surprised me and some of the other residents and Mike Tremaine particularly. But apparently there have been a lot of single car accidents where they just call a wrecker, they haul the cars off. Some of them have been actually on top of each other. So we're going to compile this with dates and correct stuff and make sure that y'all are aware of what's going on in that S curve. So because it was mentioned that there's none of their driveway, 5 Stones driveway, which is great. We obviously don't want anybody to have a wreck anywhere, but there are things beyond their control, beyond all of ours control happening on Cuthbertson Road, and we just want you to be aware of it. That's simply all it is. And again, I cannot thank you enough for. Really how impressed we were with how well you listened to us and how well you took what we had into consideration, how I felt like you blended it together in a way that we could relax and feel confident, and I greatly appreciate that. And thanks again for stepping in and being willing to take on these tough issues. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Richard Stevens, you'll approach the podium and state your name and address.
Richard Stevens at 2015 Flower Place within Champion Forest. I'm the president of the Champion Forest Homeowners Association, where we have 153 homes in there. Just to piggyback on what William brought up regarding the accidents, I happen to have been up there in the front when we had in that little S-curve there. We had at least 2 school buses run off, and we had to do some repair work for our association shrubbery stuff in front there. So we wanted to give you tonight in regard to some of the comments from the last prior meeting. We've done a light study regarding the current multicolored parking lot lights on the development there. The area is shaded in, and that really is representing a wintertime, no leaves on the trees, no blocking shrubbery of where the homeowners in that area are just pretty much lit up every night, all night long. So I think just like your yards, is that when there's no leaves on the trees, is that the light carries even across the streets there. So that was one of our points of contention, is that we, everybody likes to turn lights up and go to sleep, and so do our homeowners as well. So thank you for your time.
Quick question. I know this is public comments. We're not supposed to interject anything, but I did want to ask if this has been shared with anybody at Five Stones.
I have not spoken with anyone about that.
I asked Richard to share it with me, and I was going to bring it up tonight during the planner comments, so we can talk about how we move forward with the code complaint about light pollution.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, does anyone else like to speak in public comment? So that brings us to our additions, deletions, and adoption of agenda. I have a couple things. We need to, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We need to add a closed session for attorney advice. We could add it maybe right after the 160D updates, maybe. That would be good. That is number 17. So make 17B a closed session. And then after the municipal alliance, if you could make 20B reviewing the professional agreement with Labella, and 20C reviewing the cooperative agreement for the CDBG block grant. And if anybody else has anything to add?
I'd like to remove from the consent agenda item E, discussion on the approved resolution for the 2021 to accept the American Rescue Plan Act for funds.
Remove it, or
Just remove it from the consent agenda and add it to our discussion somewhere further down the road.
Let's add it in there with Cheryl, maybe, under 6B.
6B.
I'm sorry.
That's all I have.
Okay. And also on the consent agenda, I'd like to pull out 3F and open it up for discussion. We could put it, I guess, as 8A, in hopes that we have someone here from the planning board. I've just got one quick question on that.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the deletion of items E and F.
Second.
Okay.
No, we adopted the agenda.
Okay.
So, all in favor? And that, it's to our deputy report.
So, let's see. It is March, April, and May. Here. So, let's see, March, Had 4 larcenies in there at the infamous Target. Had a lot, necessarily here in the village, but around surrounding areas, a lot of catalytic converter getting stolen. I forget the name of the Black Belt karate place over here. One of their vans got hit. Of course, it was parked out near Waxahachie Trail. Seeing a lot of that around the area. Couple of painted property, I bought 3 Texas, and then at the end of 7 more vehicle accidents. And that's all I had for March. April was a little less interesting, I guess. Couple of simple assaults, 3 larcenies, and 1 larceny of power. 3 or 4, 4 identity thefts, and 2 motor vehicle crashes that month, so I guess everybody was paying attention to that one. In May, there was only 1 larceny at PetSmart, and in May there were 16 motor vehicle crashes, so that's all I have for May. So.
Question. I know you can't control the accident. On the larcenies, and first of all, I'm glad your report is so short. I think everybody in the community is glad that your report is so short. On the larcenies, are those people from inside our community at Target, or are they people from outside the community coming in? Outside coming in. Okay.
A lot from Charlotte, because they can just hit 84 and be right back in Victoria County. Monroe, Indian Trail.
And anything you can suggest as far as security on the catalytic converters that would...
I mean, it literally takes them a minute or 2 to get them things off, and I mean, they're gone. And they're recycling for the metal.
Palladiums.
Unless you just have to be at the right place at the right time catching them, which is...
So it's probably a ring of somebody just...
Oh, yeah.
No arrest or
matter of fact, right before I came in, there was one over here on Airport Road at, I think, near the new construction site where somebody swiped one during the day. So
nothing we can do. I'd love to post something on the newsletter or something if there was something people could do to look out for that.
Yeah, but I mean, by the time, if they do see it, try to get a vehicle description and tag number or something. Just something to help us out.
And you're working the event on the 19th
I am.
out at the park. I don't know if this would be a question for you or a question for John. I think on the list. If we end up with a rain day, which look at the weather, it doesn't look like we're going to need it, do we have any arrangement with the sheriff's department?
I don't think we're going to need a rain day.
Good.
Just going to be sweltering hot.
It'll be hot.
Yeah, there's only like a small percentage of chance of rain next Saturday from what I can see on our where they're at. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Brandon, I've got 3 questions.
Okay.
And I apologize, I should know this, but the reports that you send us every month, are those reports that are incidents that you report, or are they for so even if you're off duty, they'll show up on the report? Okay.
And there was one, back in March, there was one, and I forgot to mention this, there was 2 vehicle break-ins. One of them happened in Indian Trail. I don't know how it ended up over here on our reports, but I just wanted to clarify that.
You mentioned construction theft. I work in the construction industry, and we're getting hit daily. There's no uptick in any of that within any of our
I
sites?
haven't heard anything.
Okay.
I know there for a while, Creeks Landing, the one up here at the airport, they got hit, and we actually called them, and it was broad daylight. I mean, he loaded his truck down with lumber, so 2 juveniles. So,
And then lastly, are there any areas that you noticed an uptick that we need to pay closer attention to, either with your patrols or the sheriff's department?
I try to be seen at Target as much as I can,
Okay.
but, I obviously can't sit there my whole shift, but I try to get out, walk in, sit in the parking lot, do reports, whatever, just to be seen and try to cut down on some of the mess, but other than that. And I know they're fixing to close the intersection now, so that's probably gonna be an uptick in crashes and whatever else. So,
They're closing which intersection is that in?
Wax on in Trail View Town.
Oh, that intersection. Yeah, that's what
They got, I rode through there a while ago, they got two big signs out saying 17, so. I don't know how long it's gonna be closed.
I'm gonna say like 45 days or something. It's like,
7 weeks, I think.
it's really big, which, you know, out of a couple
Months.
Last time they were more than a month overdue.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Leads us to our finance officer report.
Okay. You have the May financial reports, and our sales and use tax is doing very well. In fact, we received the payment for June today, and we're over 100%. We are 107% of alcoholic beverage tax, and the other shared revenues with the June payment, which also is coming in today, we're right on track with all of them. The property taxes were also at 100%. As far as expenditures, we paid for the trees that had to be taken down at the park, the $1,500. I made a budget amendment during the month. I moved $150 into bank charges from office expense. So I want to let you know that. We do need another budget amendment. This is the end of the fiscal year, so we need to have all of our accounts under budget for the year ending June 30th. We had our water, the irrigation, they opened up the water again, and we had a bill of $1,000 for the water for the month. So we need $1,650 in the town hall utilities, and that there is money available in town office maintenance, if I can get a motion to do that.
What's the dollar amount, Cheryl?
$1,650.
Seems like an awful lot more.
It's all the irrigation. And I talked to Dwayne, we had a chat, and you're irrigating a lot of land here. So it didn't seem unreasonable after we looked at it.
Did he say how long each zone was being watered, time-wise?
He said 20 minutes, and I asked him if he could cut it back a little.
I don't think I do less than 15 on my yard, and some zones just 10 minutes.
Well, I asked him, and I just, my idea is, you cut it back, and if it gets too dry, then you raise it back up. But he said he seemed to think it was getting dry, although we've had more rain again, so you kind of play it by ear.
So where do you want the money moved from?
From the town office maintenance services.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we move $1,650 from the town office maintenance
to the town hall utilities.
town hall utilities.
I'll second that with the provision that we have a landscaper check the timer on zones, see if they can reduce it down even more. And also make sure they're checking that we have a working rain sensor, so we're not paying water grass on rainy days.
How long do we want to lower it to? 10 minutes?
If we're doing 20 minutes, that's a lot of money. I'd say cut it at least by 5 minutes, if not down to 12 minutes.
I'd say cut it in half.
Let's cut it in half to 10, and then if the grass dies, we'll have to bump it back up.
Okay.
Bring it out of 10? Any further discussion?
The only other thing I say is, do we really need to water all of it? And at what point, is there a piece that's less visible that you stay turn off that zone?
You can turn off any zone you want to turn off.
How far back are we watering?
Back to the tree pond, back to the retention pond.
Well,
Everywhere you've got grass.
Yeah.
well, not everywhere, but everywhere it's mowed, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's lower it to 10.
Okay,
And we'll review our budget. We'll review this bill.
next month. Mhm.
Okay. So all in favor?
Okay.
I'm just going to add on, when we look at the bill next month, could you also bring the usage, the volume usage, gallons used information for
Sure.
comparison? Because we know we had a tremendous rate hike.
There's not been a lot of people in the town hall to use water, so I'm sure 90% of this plus is going to be just irrigation.
Oh, it's more than that. It's like 100 gallons we use in town hall and
The rest of it's irrigation.
45,000 gallons or whatever it is out there, yeah.
This kind of money, we could almost put in a second meter, so we're not paying sewage fee.
We're not paying a sewage
And
fee.
it's a higher rate
We have a
for
second.
irrigation water. Irrigation water is billed at a much higher rate.
We have a second meter.
Okay. Not sure.
I have one other item. There was a request for Amy to attend the local government fundamentals online class to August 4th to 6th, and it's $180. And so we needed approval of council to spend the money from the training budget. That'll come out of next year's budget.
I think it would be really good for Lori. I mean, Lori found it. I think it'd be really great for Amy.
Yes.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the training for Amy in the amount of $180.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Next.
Okay, I think that's all I have on the current year budget.
Are we going to do the park contract in the park?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's true. Okay. Okay, I have a couple of things. The Rotary, on their insurance certificate, they limit it to a written contract, and really we should have a written contract. So they sent a brief contract like they did back in 2019 that calls for them to sell the beer and wine and for it to be split 50-50 between the Rotary Club and the village. And the only question I had was on the second page, it says the village will provide for insurance and state license amendment submission no later than September 25th. I think that's from last time, and I
That's from the last time.
don't even think it applies to us because we don't apply for a permit. So maybe we could cut that out and get their approval. So that one line.
Yeah, if that's the case, I would just strike it and initial it and then send it back to them to initial
Okay.
and approve it that way.
Okay. So do you want a motion for Amanda to sign the contract?
Yeah, I think so.
So motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Okay.
Anything else outstanding contract-wise?
Yes, I have the contracts for the entertainment at the park. We have 5 contracts, and I checked with the School of Government about what I should do for approving that, and they wanted you all to approve each one. And I think you can do them all together. So we have Austin Wetmore. He is the sound guy from 2:30 to 8 for $200. Okay. Then we have Lee Knox for 1 hour from 3 to 4 for $150. He's an entertainer. Then we have Jared Tugwell, an entertainer from 4 to 5 p.m., and he's $150. And then we have a band called the Local Honey Band. The contact is Terry Wittenberg, and they are performing from 5 to 6:30 p.m., an hour and a half for $500. And the final group is 485. The contact is John Lepke, and they're performing from 6:30 to 8 p.m. for an hour and a half for $600.
So all the contracts have George's approval?
Well, this is a format that George came up with before.
Oh, well, yes.
It's the standard North Carolina entertainment agreement.
The hate bringing this up, but they all have a rain delay or a rain clause if there's any issues. I don't expect rain again, but I always have to think the worst if it does rain. We pay them regardless of whether they play, I guess would be the question.
If they don't perform, they don't get paid.
Yeah.
The old wording used to be they got 50% up front whether they played or not. I changed that to say, you ain't keeping the 50% if you don't play. So they only get paid if they play.
Does the contract read that way?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thanks for clarifying that, John.
So do I have a motion to approve those contracts for entertainment?
So motion.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I just have one question. So I know there's set up and tear down between performances or performers. So is that included in their time, like from 3 to 4 and 4 to 5, for example?
Yeah,
Would
they
have
know they go
continuous
right
music?
early. But they don't have much to do other than plug their instruments in because the village provides the sound system, so you will be setting up the PA system. But if they've got, if it takes the drummer, I know it's going to take him an hour to set his drum kit up. That's not included in his performance time, and he has to do that to perform. The other people will be plugging their instruments in, doing a 5-minute sound check. Everything else will be in place, microphones, DI boxes, direct input box that they'll just plug into, and then it all goes to our soundboard, and then it's controlled by the sound guy.
Any further questions?
And so the drummers are sitting out as the other performers are performing?
There's only one of the bands has a drummer. I've negotiated with the drummer from 485 that if the other people want to use his drum kit, they will allow him. He will allow them to use his drum kit, which is very generous of him. So we'll save a lot of setup time by not having to change out drum kits. And the first 2 acts are solo performances. The third act is a 3-piece trio semi-acoustic. Sometimes they use a drummer, sometimes they don't. We've offered them the availability of the drum kit, so they may add a drummer. No extra cost to us, but the drum kit will be there for them.
Between the shows, there's going to be piano music.
Sorry?
Between performers, there's going to be music.
Yeah. The breaks between are going to be very short, and I think they're going to be filled with announcements.
Okay.
Thanking people, thanking the volunteers, asking people to make donations to Simplify, thanking council. We'll fill the space with announcements. One of the breaks, Amanda's going to be awarding the trophies. And if there's any dead air time, we can just plug in a phone, somebody can pull up a playlist, and we can play that through the system.
Is Wayne going to MC?
He's going to MC.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? So I think that was all for contracts, right, Cheryl? Do you have anything else, or do you want to move to item 6B?
I think that's everything.
So item 6B is removing the resolution to accept the American Rescue Plan funds. I know there was a call this week, so I didn't, is there
It's
any more?
Wednesday. We haven't had it yet.
It's on
Wednesday.
And we're hoping that it will provide some more data. I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl, this is just a step in getting ready for when we.
Right. In order to receive the funds, you have to have council approve getting the funds. So,
Do we have a dollar on the testing and stuff?
no.
Is this just basically saying if they want to give us any money, we'll take it away?
Yeah, it's just saying that you do want to receive it. I mean, you could say that you don't want to receive it.
It's been almost a year, they haven't given us an idea of how much or what we can spend on.
Well, it was only put into law March 11th.
But just for the public, it is not $2 million. We're not getting $2 million. It will not be more than 75% of our pre-pandemic operating. So don't listen to everything we read on Facebook.
At this point, it seems like there's very restricted uses, and it's a little bit hard to envision how we can even pay for what we can buy with the money, but we'll see.
So do we have any further questions, or I'll make American Rescue Plan Act 2021 funds. Second.
Without any dollar amounts or details. Sure, why not? It's kind of vague at this point.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. And that brings us to the Parks and Rec report.
I'm sorry, before we Cheryl, one last question. Cheryl, is there anything, especially for John's event coming up, where receipts have to be turned in from an accounting perspective before the 30th of June?
Oh, yeah, everything will be. Mhm.
Okay. I just don't have anything outstanding
No.
past the deadline.
We've already paid for the trophies, and we've already paid for the things that were printed over at PostNet. So, yeah.
A big water, ice, maybe a few T-shirts. Pretty much that's it.
Get your receipts in early. Okay.
Right.
Sorry.
We have a meeting May 27, regular scheduled meeting. Most of the meeting we spend working on the final details for Saturday's event. Everything is lined up. Great help from Cheryl and Amy. Friday, I've got some volunteers signed up, so we'll be starting putting up the alcohol corral barrier. Weather's looking great, so we'll be good. We're going to take tarps. We have tarps just in case there's a shower and we can throw over the electronic equipment, but right now it's looking like there ain't a shower. We had identified some potential issues with the rain date. I think it's a moot point now. Most of the 3 of the 4 were able to play on the 26th. The Rotary is good for the 26th. And I found an alternate band to fill in for the band that can't play on the 26th. So we were set ready to go with the 26th if we had to. It doesn't look like we'll need to. So banners are up on the corner. Amy and Cheryl helped with the sign permit. We have one banner up in the park just to give regular park visitors a heads up. There's going to be an event that day, so they don't get upset when they arrive and they can't find parking. Tuesday, tomorrow, I'm going to move that banner to the CVS corner, which is where we said in the permit it's going to go. So we'll put it up there so people going 84 and Waxman and trying to go there. Lots of advertising on Facebook, everybody's posting it. It's going to be hot.
John, you were talking about the banners. Did you include the small signs for parking and
No, not yet. I got the grandkids all this week, so it's going to be kind of tough.
would you like me to do it for you?
I'd love you to do that for me. So we're all set. Looks great. We just got to keep our fingers crossed. We get plenty of thirsty people coming, and we make a lot of money on beverage sales. I think we have 20 pre-registered for the car show already. I think that's better than we had last time pre-registered. And I think because you've heard before, the last car show we filled the paved lot and pretty much filled the grass lot with people who showed up on the day. So
How many total was that?
we got about 80 slots total. So, when we're full, we turn people away. I hope it doesn't get to that. But a lot of car guys won't come out till they know it's not going to rain because they spend an awful lot of time waxing those machines and they don't like to bring them out in the rain. So, we reviewed the park charter. That was a request. I don't know exactly who made it, but we reviewed it. There's a lot of historical stuff in there about Dogwood Park, developing Dogwood Park buildings. So we discussed this about if we're going to review the charter, we'll just delete all that stuff that's gone and done. But most of the mandates for the committee we think are still valid, and we're just going to leave them in there. The one thing that did come up, the term for the chairman is 4 years. I think I'm reaching the end of the 4 year, so I need to check with Cheryl the exact dates when you might have to find somebody else.
Are you keeping term limits in there?
Sorry?
Or did Parks and Rec want to keep term limits in there?
Yeah, we said we keep. There's no point changing them. Of course, council could always renew another term, got to do 2 more years. All right. Anyway, I forgot there were term limits in there, but some of the current members are also beyond their term limits. So we need to look at that and either renew their terms or find new members. So that's on me to delete all the old stuff and resubmit to you guys once Parks and Rec has looked at it after I've made all the changes. We had a discussion about group gatherings and the park rental policy. We didn't come into any final decisions yet to present to council, and we're trying to come up with something that allows a small informal group to use the park without going through a whole bureaucracy. 10 people want to show up at the park and have a party, great. But 200 people want to show up, completely overflow the parking lot. We want to figure out a way to manage that. So we had some debate about how to do it. I've made some suggestions based on how much the event would occupy the parking lot and how much of a inhibition that would be on regular park visitors using the parking lot. So laid the idea out, we've gone away, we'll be thinking about it and we'll revisit it at the next meeting.
The parking, I think, is a key issue.
Yeah, it's around that. I continue to go to the park and make visits at different times of the day and when the weather's different, and I am keeping a record. I go around, I count the number of empty spaces in the parking lot. I have yet to go and see no parking spaces. So we'll come up with something and present it to council. We talked about sponsorship policy review, mostly around the event sponsorship. Council said, we need to look at raising some money at these events, so we looked at formalising some kind of event sponsorship. Previously, sponsorship had been done through Wesley Chapel Friends of Parks. They're not doing events anymore, so now we need to come up with something. So we're kind of thinking along the lines of a bronze, silver, and gold level sponsorship for an event, and the corporate sponsor of the business would get different things for that money. We haven't decided on the amount yet, but just as an example, $50, they get the name on the flyer that's handed out on the day. $100, they get the name on the flyer and they get plugs during the announcements from the MC. Maybe the gold level, $200, they can post a banner in the park during the event or a sign in addition to all the other stuff, and maybe get their company logo on the back of a t-shirt. Something along those lines. So there's different incentives for sponsors. And then we talked about if we have a craft kind of fair, which has been done in the past, how much do we charge the vendors if they want to do arts and craft show and that kind of stuff. So we're still working on it. We're going to come to you guys with a proposal and hope you find it acceptable.
One thing just on that, John, is as you're thinking about the sponsorship and what you would charge and you're thinking about what that gets them, is making sure anything that we would buy because of their sponsorship, that sponsorship level is going to cover it. For example, like if we say, oh, we'll buy the sign that you're going to put in the park, for example, let's just make sure that sponsorship level would cover any cost of the building.
We would.
I don't think we want that.
We wouldn't be buying the sign for it. We'd allow them to display a sign and probably come
or
up with
if we
some
have to
stuff.
print their names on the back of shirts and there's extra printing charges, just make sure that we don't end up losing money on the sponsorship.
Yeah, clear.
Yeah.
We talked about the drinking fountain. We selected one. I've called the plumber to try and give me quotes on installing it where the current hydrant is and installing it further inside the park, which will involve paying for a buried line. Personal opinion is you ain't going to be able to do it for the budget you guys are thinking about if you want to bring it all into the park. But we'll find out when I get some quotes. I haven't heard back from him yet. I know he's kind of busy. And that was about it.
John, other than the orange fencing, what did you want to prep on Friday?
Nothing, just the orange fencing on Friday. The rest we'll do Saturday. Amy said we got quite a few volunteers signed up. So I think we're good on labour. Yeah, and as usual, it's probably the end of the night. We're going to struggle for people, as we always do. It ends up Mike and myself probably doing most of it.
And did you see the email I sent out to Cheryl regarding the landscaper for the park? Basically saying that make sure he knows that there's an event.
That was done weeks ago. He knows there's an event.
And then we're going to be setting up orange fencing
Yeah, he knows.
Friday. So I just don't want to put the orange fencing and make him go around it.
No, I know. He knows he's either going to do it Thursday. I had this discussion with him 2 weeks ago. He's either going to do it Thursday, the mowing, I told him it needs to be top looking. And I said, or Friday morning, because Friday afternoon, I'm planning to go out about 2 o'clock Friday afternoon to start hammering posts and putting up orange fence.
Is there any reason we should have a follow-up meeting prior to the event with just Parks and Rec people?
I don't think we do.
Okay.
Any further questions for John? Thank you, John.
Just, we are like 21 registered for the car show already, and we've already raised $350 for the vet cause. So I'm really pleased with the progress we made so far.
I ran into Paul Caparonis at the bank a couple of days ago. Gave him a flyer. He's interested in not only joining the car show, but also potentially he may contact you about booth space.
At the show, not too late.
I told him to contact you. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. And the big question is, do you have time set aside for Amanda to sing?
We will find it. If Amanda wants to do a song, we'll find
Happy
it.
birthday tonight. But I'll have to have a couple of beers first.
I'll get a band to sing happy birthday.
Don't we have to pay royalties for that though?
No, we did, we paid.
We have a license. We have a license to.
Yeah, you paid me. I'll give you now.
I can get a band to sing happy birthday. All right.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay. All right, so anybody in August, you're welcome to join us on Saturday at 3 to 8.
And John, what time do you want to start on Saturday? Truck rental, all that kind of stuff.
I'm going to go pick the truck up about 11:30, 11:45, be at the town hall at 12. I'd like to get all the gear, and my aim is to have the sound system set up. We're not doing lights this time, which makes it easier. I want to have the sound system set up by 2:30. The sound guy is going to arrive at 2, and then that'll give us 30 minutes to do sound checks before the real performances start. At 3.
Maybe a little earlier. I'd like to see a little more wiggle room there because there's a lot that's going to need to be done that day. But it's up to you. The other thing is, Cheryl, I'm going to need a key so that we can get in the front door, which my standard key doesn't do, and also take out the barriers in between the doors so we roll the gear in and out. In the past, I used Beth Leonard's or
I thought you had a master key. I'll check.
I'll get the master key by that weekend.
I'll check.
Just to use for the weekend, and then I'll get that to you Monday. Thank you.
All right, so that leads us to our planning board report and comment from our planner. I know Sousa is on vacation. He's in Banks. So, let the end. John, would you like to share anything?
Sure. Well, I will relate the happenings at the last planning board meeting. Otherwise, I might. What I remember from it, it wasn't a very big meeting. We did spend a good amount of time discussing a set of amendments to a section of the ordinance having to do with accessory structures, and at the request of Cheryl and Amy Mosset, because the way the ordinance is currently written is very confusing in how it is applied, and literally several questions a week about how to deal with the various aspects of regulating accessory structures versus how you regulate additions to structures, and the difference between enclosed and unenclosed additions and roofed and unroofed additions. And so the ordinance is just not very artful in how it currently regulates such things and interchangeably uses the terms accessory use and accessory structure from an accessory building for meaning all, calling different things the same things and then changing the name of it in the middle of the sentence. And so it was mostly for, the discussion was mostly for the purpose of introducing that to the planning board. And we had some recommendations from them and some requests, and so we will be continuing to discuss that at our upcoming meeting. The other big item for our upcoming meeting, Central Baptist Church owns some property there on the corner where the Arborbrook School is also co-located with them. And they have filed a zoning map amendment request to rezone that 11-acre property to OI. There are a number of issues with them right now. The church is a legal non-conforming use because they're not a permitted use by right, and they don't have a conditional use permit for the church in the R40 district. The school is in a very similar situation. It was approved a couple of times theoretically by the issuance of past conditional use permits for a school trailer, initial, and then a subsequent one, but no permission was ever given originally for the school to be there in the first place, which creates lots of fun issues in terms of how do we move. They want to add on and expand their campus. And since they're co-located with the church, that introduces additional complications. The underlying R40 zoning on that corner there makes it even more complicated. And so in light of other things going on in the village, felt it would be best if the church at least had the proper underlying zoning. The school, as we found out, the Board of Adjustment here would probably be in their favor since they've been around for greater than the 7-year period. They would get to stay. The expansion is a little bit more difficult question in how you do that. Doing it in the OI district could be less difficult from a regulatory standpoint. The schools are required to have like 10 acres of land on their own for a school in the R40 district, and they of course do not have 10 acres of land there now. So that will be going to the planning board for their review this month, and then eventually coming to you in some way, shape, or form. So those are the big items on the planning board's agenda right now. We finally got a third iteration of the site plan from Carolina Pets recently, and Bonnie and I have gotten back some comments. Hopefully this will be the last go-around, but they totally redesigned their stormwater system in between the second and third go-arounds, and so Bonnie had to do a whole new review of that. I think they're almost there from a zoning standpoint. And then Heritage, very quickly on the heels of the approval of the final plat for sections 7 and 8, has submitted a third submission of sections 11 through 14 of a final, or preliminary plat actually, for sections 11 through 14 of Heritage. So
I thought Heritage was originally only like 3 or 4 phases. How are we?
Well, these are sections, in platting sections. It's not phases of development.
Okay.
And it was amended, I believe, a year or two ago to change some of that around. I'm not 100% familiar with all the history, but there have been changes to it, I think, over time in terms of the order of business and how they were going to go about developing it. But so there is I learned when they submitted a third submission of the sections 11 through 14, and so Bonnie, I think, mostly had comments. I didn't really see anything from my perspective, but
It's normally 1, 2, or 3, phase 1, 2, or 3.
I think it's still phase 2, but it might be phase 3. I think the last section, the 7 and 8, were in phase 2, I believe. We don't see everything that comes in because most of it's in Indian Trail, so I'm not particularly sure where we are with that. And
So we don't know how much is left to be developed in Wesley Chapel within the Heritage.
I think this might be
this might
it.
be it?
To me, it appears that this would be the final section. And this is still just the southern portions of these sections, which...
I'm scared on our one.
Also, I think you heard my comment earlier. You're going to make sure you share this with Five Stones.
Well,
we need to talk about how we handle that. So what we have right now is a formal complaint, and how do we move forward from this point? It might not be that we need to follow the proper procedure.
So, I assume, cannot guarantee since I wasn't here, that the lighting for Five Stones was reviewed for the ordinance requirements and then approved after demonstrating compliance. I am not 100% sure of that. I am not technically qualified to investigate the complaint from the standards set forth in the ordinance necessarily. And so it would probably, if we're going to allege that they are violating something as objective as a lighting ordinance that specifies lumens and things like that, then it would probably be best to hire a qualified lighting engineer to make a determination whether or not they're in compliance or not.
This is not the first time we've had an issue with lighting. How have we done this in the past if we didn't have a staff member go out there with a light meter versus hiring somebody?
What other issues have we had with lighting?
We've got lighting.
We can, I guess, make the allegation to them that they are not in compliance, but if we can't prove they're not in compliance, then
At this point, I think the pertinent thing to do is just inform them officially that there's been a complaint, and then we're working on the details.
Okay.
We're investigating the complaint.
I will let them know. I think
that's
maybe,
all I ask. How we move forward after that is subjective, but
did your email to Reed include?
No, it told him I would follow up after tonight's meeting, so I can tell him.
Oh, no, I'm happy to. I think probably something else.
Okay.
There's something about their pond that Bonnie let me know the other day, and so I need to follow up with them on that as well.
Are in the neighborhood allowed to speak for all the people, or do we need to receive a
I
complaint?
mean, anybody can allege a complaint or of a violation of the ordinance, and we'll, if it's something that's apparent, we can take care of it. If it's something that requires a significant amount of investigation, it would probably be best for that's outside of my capacity and capability, and be time for.
I think we've had the discussion several times that code enforcement is not something that you ever break money on, or investigating these complaints. So if we have to hire someone, we have to hire someone.
And Labella may have someone that.
It's possible. Most developer type engineering firms have somebody that was qualified to assess lighting like that. The Carolina Pets has a lighting plan that shows the distribution of light on the premises.
one of my first questions to a professional lighting engineer would be whether this needs to be looked at separately in the winter than in the summer.
Yeah,
because of the leaves on the tree. And the way I've seen it done in the past, didn't matter if it was winter or summer, you just basically walk to the very edge of the property line, hold a light meter, and if there's any light bleeding off, it's going to show. It doesn't matter what the trees are behind you, it's whatever is there on the edge of the property. Well, like I said, I'm not a light engineer either, so we need to make sure we get with a professional and make sure that they
if we're going to, I think they said they contract with Union Power maybe to do their lighting. One would think that somebody from Union Power, like it would be their paid person making the representation, could certify that. I don't know how many lumens their fixtures are, but there's a calculation. The other as y'all were discussing it earlier. There is something in here about, and this probably might not be known to everyone in the village right now. It's the first time I think I've probably noticed it in the ordinance was, basically, unless otherwise specified, 75% of all outdoor light fixtures for basically anything non-residential have to be turned off between 11 p.m. and sunrise. And so that is, I don't know how many lights they have on it there. I have not been to the church at 11 p.m. Probably not sticking around tonight to see. Well, who knows? But if anyone would like to, that's around here, would like to.
Well, I wonder if they're aware of that, because that is one.
They're probably not. I think that most people, things are fairly dark in Wesley Chapel compared to other places. That's, a lot of that's due to the design of full cutoff fixtures and stuff like that keep the light facing down. But I can certainly communicate that to them, and they will then promptly let me know who else has lights on after 11 p.m., saving us a lot of trouble going after them as well.
Including us, the town.
Including town.
The park is not in compliance, the park lights run all night.
Now, there's a balance between security for the building or the parking lot versus.
I agree completely.
And that's what they brought up during their meeting, was that they turned down as much as they could per their security team's advisement. So, and I know also one thing we need to look into is when the map was done versus when they did make recent changes to the lighting plans.
I had not seen that map before. I wasn't really exactly sure what it
I'll email it to you.
I think I got it.
Oh, okay.
But
So our first step will be to communicate with Firestone.
there is a concern. Yes.
And we will take it from there. Council, can I have a pre-motion that if we need to hire a light engineer, we do it, so we don't drag our feet on this till next month?
I think it's required to hire a engineer, regardless. So it's a third party. It's not from the neighborhood. It's not from the church. It's somebody independent.
We can allege that the value of the number of lumens at the property line is X, but without being qualified to do so. And the people from Champion Forest would need to allow said person to enter onto their property. And if this, it's going to probably be, a little while before somebody else traipsing around their backyard at
Well, especially
10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night once all the lights are gone.
I think the way it's been done in the past, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is we only have to really contact Five Stones and have this person check the lumens at the property line at Five Stones.
They could, but I would, if I was Five Stones, I'd tell you to get a warrant.
Well,
probably, because it could cost them a lot of money if there's a problem.
So our first step is
we can ask them, but we will ask them.
We will reach out to Five Stones, but I would like council's approval to proceed with the lighting investigation.
So motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Who seconded it?
Yeah.
Thank you,
Let's not drag our feet with that either.
Are you going to get in touch with Bonnie?
I can check with Bonnie, yeah. Usually I just bill out the engineering fees to a client, so.
Well, this is more of a code thing.
I think that's
Okay.
one of the issues we've had is things like floodplain violations. I kind of need to be able to. If people were alleging floodplain violations, it would be great not to have to worry about trying to extract money when if there is no violation. We're not going to send a bill to John Q. homeowner when they're doing things right. And I know it's kind of late for budget, but just something to.
Do we need to put a dollar amount cap on that motion, or do we want to do it regardless of cost? I think it's got to be done.
Yeah, it's got to be done. But I think what Bob is asking for next budget year, for some leeway for enforcing and investigating flood zone.
Violations.
Or just
For violation.
anything that requires any kind of engineering or other types of technical.
Do you have an amount off the top of your head? Because we haven't had.
It doesn't. Yeah.
So this is the first time that we're coming up with something where we feel like we need to hire an expert. We really don't have any. No, we've used Bonnie's.
Yeah.
We did the flood zone thing.
Yeah.
With the 2 flood zone violations, and there's been others in the past.
About how much did we spend on those?
We build that out.
Do you remember?
Close to $1,000 on one, and there's another one that's pending that's
It's not.
400 or
not cheap.
500. Yeah.
Also, another violation, for example, would be a noise violation. So we went out and bought a handheld meter to register sound for like when we have events at the park. Bill Dustin bought it, and we go to the edge of the property, hold his meter, make sure we weren't over a certain decibel level for the events at the park.
We have a meter?
We do.
Yes, we do. We have a decibel meter.
Decibel meter, that's what I heard.
Oh, where is it?
It's in the music equipment.
It's in with all the other sound equipment, yeah. So yeah, it was just something where Bill would walk out there and hold the meter and say, okay, play something, and we're like, yeah, you're within compliance. So we need to maybe invest in a light meter too to make sure we're in compliance, but it sounds like it needs to really be a certified person to do the report, not just one of our employees with a handheld meter.
I think if it's something as significant as potentially having to redo the lighting over an entire
I agree.
parking lot, then we need to be very sure that they're actually in violation.
I think the decibel meter was more
For your own.
covering our own backsides,
Yeah.
because we would have been violated. Right.
Anything, so just note that down, council, prior to public hearing for the budget, okay?
What about your comment about lights off after 11? Is that something?
Y'all want me to send out some letters?
If you,
If you know, it's in the ordinance. It probably has not been enforced ever, or at least for a very long time.
We have to
Definitely
keep,
not, because we don't follow it.
you know, the town hall lights, the park lights, everything, the last thing we want to do is be selectively enforcing, because then we're singling out individual or group.
But we're also complaint driven, so.
It's true.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if we know the ordinance is such that we know we're in violation, we know how we are, is that an ordinance we need to look at, or does everybody wants to say it's security and then have to get to that? So it sounds like maybe.
That's up to you. I mean, the intent
discussion in
was,
the future was looking like ordinance.
the intent was obvious that they have a darker
Yeah.
night sky. If that's definitely one way to do it. I think Wesley Chapel's pretty dark compared to other suburban areas with this amount of development in their course.
Yeah, but to your point, Lori, I think it needs to get back to the planning board quickly and let them bring something else that's fine.
The question to the planning board is, should we continue to, should we amend the ordinance to take this out? Is that the,
You only have two choices:
leave it in?
enforce or amend. Those are your only two choices.
And amending does not mean deleting,
Sure.
right? I mean, there
It can be changed
Right.
to,
Let's look at it.
there'll be ways to change it.
Okay.
And then, Bob, do you have anything else before we talk about the planning board change?
Councilman Como had asked me to get in touch with DOT about the light signal timing at Newtown and Cuthbertson. Have emailed them. They went through the division engineer to the division traffic engineer, and they assigned it to a person. They said it would take about 6 weeks for them to do the initial study. He said that they would likely want to look at it again once school started back up.
Makes sense.
So I think we will get something. I will follow back up with them in a month or so. And it probably won't be the end of the story on it.
And for those of you who are in the know, people in the audience, the idea was, I asked if, from an engineering perspective, they could increase the green light on Cuthbertson Road going on to Newtown Road by 20 or 30 seconds, allowing more traffic to get off Cuthbertson Road only between the hours of 2 and 4 when school gets out. That way there'll be less of a backup on Cuthbertson Road, which won't cost anything, but it seemed like a very simple solution. Adding a few seconds would really get a lot more cars through that intersection. But I'm not an engineer, so that's why we contacted the DOT.
We also contacted DOT. We contacted DOT on behalf of the Winding Creek HOA. They're going to be doing a speed study right there where what is it called?
Cresswind?
Crestland. We have also, George, do you have an update about, we asked them to stop using Crestwood's at Wesley Chapel because they are not in Wesley Chapel and they wanted to be in Wesley Chapel. And then we told them they had to follow our rules. They said, no, we don't want to be in Wesley Chapel, but they're using Wesley Chapel in their marketing.
I have a cease and desist letter ready to go out. And then the next step after that is whether or not they decide to cease and desist.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
On the thing about the Hutchinson Road timing of the light, you said it would take about 6 weeks and then might have to redo it when school starts. Well, school will start just shortly after that in 6 weeks because it's not that long of a. Could they just do it once? I know it's all of our tax dollars. It just seems more efficient to wait till after school starts.
I'll look back at the email that they sent and see exactly what he might have inferred. And I don't know if the closure, the roundabout construction may also necessitate a
I
delay.
think it's best to wait until after the roundabout's done and after the school starts back up, and then,
I didn't know if it was something that's going to take 6 months to do, or
well, what's it going to be out to? It's going to take 5 minutes for some guy to drive out there, turn the timer, add 15 seconds to the light, and it's done. But it's all the red tape leading up to that.
So I'll keep y'all posted too on the speed study for,
How far out what are they doing to see the study?
because it's going to include trust funds. And that's DOT.
And George, you said that the cease and desist letter was ready to go out. Is there a reason why it hasn't gone out yet?
I hadn't looked at the draft that my associate sent me on Friday.
Okay.
That's all.
Do you need our blessing to send it out?
I mean, if you want to look at it, I mean, it's kind of what Amanda and I talked about in terms of stop using the name. I mean, that's basically it. Yeah.
I don't want to read it, especially if it's already been reviewed by the lawyers.
Yeah.
I just want to give it the green light to get it out.
Yeah. I can send it out tomorrow. I just didn't have a chance to look at it today.
Okay. Anything else, Vaughn, before we move to the chairman? Well, we have also part of this item is appointing the chairman of the planning board for your beginning July 2021. So if Vaughn's finished,
I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, Vaughn.
We also moved the appointing regular members down too. Yeah.
Okay. But I thought we'd do the chair since it was in the item. So is John willing to be chair again for the next year? Do we know?
We haven't seen him.
I have not.
Probably,
Otherwise.
I would guess.
Can I ask a question? Sure. So John raised that the Parks and Recs charter had term limits. Do we have something comparable in the planning board? Because I know we've reappointed people periodically, so I'm kind of wondering why we have such a difference between the Parks and Rec committee and the planning board in terms of appointments.
The planning board is all set out in the rules of procedures, and they all do have three-year terms.
Right.
Yeah.
We reappoint them and everything else.
Mhm.
But I didn't know because we just kind of treated the committees differently. I was just kind of like, oh, I wonder why.
I don't know if it makes a difference, but please remember that the planning board is a paid position, where Parks and Rec and communications and safety, those are volunteer positions.
Right, but they're all appointments.
True.
So does council appoint the chair?
For planning board? Yes.
So
As far as I know.
Motion to appoint, reappoint John for the planning board chair.
So motion, provided John accepts the nomination.
And this is just a one-year term because you do it every year.
And then they
For the
appoint
chair.
their
Vice chair. Mhm.
All right, I'll second. Any further discussion? All in favor? And then David, you wanted to pull off the item F, reappointing Vince and Wrinkle?
Yeah, and again, it's just one quick question. Well, I guess two quick questions. Number one, have all three agreed to serve another term? And at one time, there was some discussion about attendance with planning board members. Have all three agreed to commit to the time required to attend?
Well, I just asked them if they wanted to be reappointed to a new term.
Okay.
They've all had, they occasionally do miss. But if there's sort of a separate mechanism if somebody is missing too many meetings to address that.
Okay.
Cheryl, can you confirm that they only get paid when they show up?
Oh, definitely. Mhm.
And if that's the case, I'll make a motion that we approve all three to new terms.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, so that brings us to the motion to create comprehensive plan oversight committee. I have heard from Deb and Francesca Mazinga, both Deb's on planning board and communications, and Francesca's on communications committee. Unless I've missed someone, those are the only people I've had volunteer.
Isn't it your perspective to get representatives from planning board, representatives from council, and maybe residents as well?
I would be willing to serve for council. And then we could have one more, and then we could count Deb for planning board, Francesca for communications, and then we would like one Parks and Rec member. John, would you be willing? Okay. So that takes care of, so we've
It's a
got,
short-term thing, right?
it's 8 to 10 meetings over the next year. You have to spend more time with me. So that would cover communications committee, Parks and Rec. We need planning board. We have Deb, and then we don't is 4 enough? Paul? Is 4 members enough for your comp plan oversight committee? Those are the number of volunteers we have.
You need a tiebreaker?
No. Not.
Ideally, would you rather have
Be
more?
nice.
I think we had talked about what?
We
6?
talked about 2, 4, 6.
5 is nice at least for a quorum, because otherwise, if you have 4, you can only have one person absent.
We're used to that. We've been making it work for over a year.
We're the fabulous 4.
Up to you.
I'll leave my volunteer.
Okay.
Can we get a resident that's not a planning board member or a council member or a Parks and Rec member? Or
I think we kind of wanted some weight behind it, because you could still be involved in like public comment and stuff. But
Well, that gives you 5 at least.
My main concern is to ensure that both bodies are well informed about what's going on and able to provide adequate, diverse input into the process.
If you need a resident, I would have you volunteer.
what's your name, sir?
Jim Hill. Is it okay if I'll just give my country.
We will definitely, we do have some opportunities for citizen engagement, so we will definitely be reaching out to you, okay? Thank you, Jim. Any other candidates?
So will we have some sort of charter or something about what the expectations for this committee is and for the members? So they clearly know now that they volunteered, but then they clearly understand their remit.
Yes, we will, at our first meeting, we will discuss all of the ins and outs of doing oversight. And I anticipate we will be in touch with everyone now assuming they're appointed, and work on setting a meeting date for our initial meeting sometime in early July.
So can I appoint, I have to appoint everyone, can I appoint myself also?
Mhm.
So I would like to appoint Mr. John Lefke, Mr. David Boyce, myself, Ms. Deb Bledsoe, Ms. Francesca. I cannot say her last name. It starts with an N.
Mazariegos,
Yeah,
I think.
for the comp plan oversight committee. And we are going to definitely include Mr. Jim Hill in our citizen involvement. There are several places we can reach out.
Yeah, I think initially when initially the discussions were, would it be just the planning board or some combination of the boards and committees of the village to do this oversight committee? That's the part we haven't actually set up.
But they're going to be focus groups and
We will have some opportunities for public engagement as we go through, especially now that we're able to meet in person more easily.
any further questions on this item?
will it be clearly defined at the first meeting exactly what the goals and responsibilities will be?
Yeah.
down to the public hearing on RZ 21-21. So I will open the public hearing on RZ 21-01, a request to rezone from R40 to RA40, 1.8 acres at 513 Jim Parker Road. We do have a public comment. We have Ms. Sue Threet. Sorry, Sue Threet. You'll just approach the podium, state your name and address.
Okay, I'm Sue Threet, property owner at 409 Jim Parker Road. And I just have a couple of concerns or questions, really. I wanted to make sure the rezoning from R40 to RA40, that's specific to Mr. Seuss's property, correct? Okay. And my next comment is, will that have any negative or positive effect on the adjacent property owners, such as property value, taxes, etc.? Can you share that with me?
We can ask the planner to speak to it when I don't know if you want to do it now or.
I think procedural-wise, you go for 3 minutes, and then after that, we can.
That's fine. I wasn't prepared to say anything, and then when I came in and I found out I could, I thought, well, I had concerns. So am I back to my seat?
Unless you have something else to say.
That's it. I just have
We'll try to get your question answered.
Okay, thank you.
Vaughn, will you speak to those?
Sure.
Or the application, whatever.
So the owner of the property located at 513 Jim Parker Road submitted a petition to amend the zoning map. That's actually 3 separate parcels to change the classification of those properties from R40 to RA40. Total area of 21.8 acres of land within those 3 parcels. They currently are used for the owner's primary residence as well as agricultural purposes. Immediately sounding that, the subject properties are zoned R40 as well, while the land across on Jim Parker Road on the frontage there is zoned R20, directly across the street. There's attached zoning map in the report for your reference there. The future land use map designates the subject properties and immediately adjacent lands as low-density residential, and the lands across Jim Parker Road from there as medium-density residential. And the future land use map is included as well. The R40 and RA40 districts are fairly similar in terms of the development regulation. Setbacks are bigger in RA40 compared to the R40 district. Lot sizes are the same. Where the biggest point of divergence is the uses that are permitted by right in the RA40 district versus the R40 district. I think I was coming on board right when the RA40 district was being amended, so I wasn't involved in all the initial discussions about it. It appears from what I know about the intent of that amendment last year was to expand the types of uses that were permitted, essentially in furtherance of the village's goal of broadening the ability of agricultural property owners to use their property for other things that were not explicitly the growing of crops or the raising of livestock or the things that we immediately associate with farming, but to allow them some other uses that might be appropriate in rural areas, as the name, agricultural areas, as the name implies. And so the expansive number of uses is purposeful. So that district is intended to encourage agricultural uses, and so there are lots of supportive uses that might be found in agricultural areas. I think where we might see some divergences that it's not, in this case, it would not be being applied to a large swath of land. 21 acres, 22 acres is not a small amount of land, but it's not a 400-acre area of the village. And continue to be surrounded by dissimilarly zoned property, but from a development perspective, it would be, from a residential development perspective, it would be fairly similar. From a non-residential development perspective, then a wider range of uses would be permitted on that property. as it would be on any other RA 40 property in the village. So the future land use plan isn't really instructive beyond a brief mention of agriculture in terms of the future land use map in particular. And so low density residential, and that's consistent with R40, of course, but the assumption would be that RA 40, from a low density residential perspective, would be consistent with that as well. The planning board did vote at their April meeting in favor of the proposed rezoning and found it to be consistent with preserving the village's low density residential character and the district's intent to encourage agricultural uses. Now I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
What is the current setback of the buildings on the property now? And because I know the setbacks are larger for RA 40, just wanted to.
Let's see, I think John had a survey.
I'm just seeing a drawing, a big red line right next to the house.
I thought.
Something that's exactly accurate.
Let me,
And along that line, how big is that? How long is his building? How big is his building in square feet?
there is not a dimension on the survey, and so I would only be guessing how far his.
So the applicant is not here tonight, so I was going to ask council for a continuation of this public hearing, so he would have a chance to speak. Maybe in the meantime, we could find out the setbacks from John, and I know there's something in here about if the building was bigger than a certain amount of square feet. If we could figure out how many square feet that barn is.
With regard to what particular?
I know that's in here. Small scale, about small scale agribusinesses. That have still no buildings or one building no more than 5,000 square feet. I know that barn is pretty large. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how many square feet it is.
For purposes thumbnail, so I figured that's why he's having the zoning changed. I haven't spoken with him.
So if we can find out the square footage of the building and the setbacks. Do you have, I have a couple more questions too. In a case like this, should the parcels be combined? Like if he were to subdivide this land, if he subdivided it, would they also be RA 40?
Yes.
So there's no protection in making him combine. Any further questions?
Oh, I've got a question, I've got a concern with the permitted uses. And I know that we as council okayed this, but I also know that, as in most cases, the zoning, that's an organic type situation. Just looking at the permitted use table, I'm not sure about churches, places of worship, synagogues, and temples, what that does to increase agribusiness. Same question with bed and breakfast inns. I think my big question is this. I know the intent of the RA 40 zone is to bring about incentives to maintain the agricultural feel of this village. But say Brad Horvath and I are neighbors, and I propose, because I've got 3 acres of land and I've got a garden, but I want to rezone it to RA40. After it's rezoned, there's nothing at all that would prevent me, as I understand it, only please correct me if I'm wrong. There's nothing that would prevent me from saying, I'm going to open up a tractor repair facility and have tractors stacked up throughout that property. I don't think that would go very well in the Bradford House neighborhood.
I was thinking you go to the microbrewery.
Yeah, I probably would need that more than with the tractors. But am I thinking out of line, Bill?
Not necessarily. There is, again, an expansive, the agribusiness, the terminology that was adopted as part of the ordinance was fairly expansive in what it defined as potential agricultural uses. Again, not having the benefit of being involved in the discussions about it, I don't know which direction the planning board was headed with it, and I think you certainly should consider the range of potential uses that are permitted in that district as you make your final decision on it. I don't think it would not be atypical for a rural county to permit all of these uses in a district that was fairly expansive in application throughout rural areas of the county. There are some RA40 zoned properties, I believe, now already in Wesley Chapel that were zoned that way prior to the changes that were made in the ordinance to the permitted uses, et cetera. And so the situation already exists in certain areas where somebody could do that. If the council is concerned about the uses permitted in the district, then it can certainly be looked at again by the planning board to either make some more of those uses conditional uses, which has its pluses and minuses, or to remove them from consideration and say that we're happy for people to have traditional agricultural type uses, but maybe being as expansive as this is maybe not appropriate, given this isn't the only, Mr. Souza is not the only person to have inquired about being rezoned to RA40. The other person did not, after some discussion with them about the necessity or lack thereof of doing it.
I've got a question for George on this. If we continue this public meeting till next month, and when John is specifically here, I think that's the reason for doing it. Will John be here speaking as a resident or the chairman of the planning board? Because I think that's kind of a great area in this particular topic of his involvement.
I mean, I think he'd be speaking as a citizen, right? I mean, the planning board doesn't have an involvement in this council meeting other than their report and what their recommendation is passed on to you. So,
for example, if Amanda was having something done where she was ruling on something that would directly affect her, she would have to pass the gavel to someone else.
Well, he's not making any decision.
And John did not participate in voting on the recommendation. He recused himself.
Just want to make sure that we're legal and clear and above board on this as we move forward.
So council could, if council still has concerns about some of the permitted uses, the application could be returned, denied.
It could be denied. The decision would theoretically be that due to the range of permitted uses and the situation of the property and its surroundings, it would not be appropriate, in your opinion, to be rezoned in that manner. If you were comfortable with it, then the opposite could be true. But the full range of uses is, you're required to consider anything that could go there as part of your decision. Because he might have his own plans for it, but he may not live there for, sell it tomorrow and move away.
Or he could sell half of it tomorrow.
What's that?
Or he could sell half of it.
Or so. It's potentially difficult to sell that land given how it's configured. Access is an issue. We would take a look at that. He's permitted now to. He could tomorrow recombine it from 3 parcels into 2, and that's between him and his anybody else with an interest in the property. The village could not stop him from doing that. He would have to comply with zoning regulations, but it would be an exempt subdivision unless it qualified under some other circumstance.
Yeah, this feels like when we did the tree or the conservation subdivision rather, and we had the first applicant come in that said, hey, we want a subdivision under this, right? So when we did the ordinance and looked at it, we're like, oh, this looks good, this sounds good, but then once he came in and did it, I myself, I had questions. I'm like, I don't like some of these things the way it's been done. And I think now here's another one where we approve, without really having a true use case to evaluate it against. And now we're getting one and really looking at how it would apply and what it would mean. I personally have lots of questions and concerns like David raised about the permitted uses and choices. I mean, yes, you can have horses if you have this much room, but there were no horses there when I moved in and never expected to have horses, and now I do kind of thing. And just think maybe it needs a relook now that some time has passed and we have some requests for the zoning.
In the R40 district, I think most traditional agricultural uses of land can be accommodated under the ordinance.
Would a sawmill?
I don't think so.
What about a miniature golf course?
Not to my knowledge.
I don't understand how it's agribusiness. Okay.
So, do we have any more questions for Ron or the applicant that we would like answered before our July meeting? Other than the setbacks of the square feet of the building?
I will inquire with.
Do we need a motion to continue it until the next month?
Yeah, I think you do.
I'll make a motion to continue the meeting until next month, or the public hearing next month.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. So we will resume this in July. And so that brings us to our public hearing on the proposed 2021-22 budget and fee schedule. So I will open the public hearing for the proposed 2021-22 budget fee schedule. We do have 2 people signed up to speak. We have Mr. Brad Horvath. He knows the drill.
Council, Brad Horvath, 317 Candela Drive. And no, I don't know if my subdivision would like that particular usage. I came to talk a little bit about, just very briefly, about the budget. And it's obviously one of the more difficult things I think that the council has to take up every year. Not everybody's going to get what they want. I'm also on the Park and Rec Committee. I'm not here to talk about the Park and Rec Committee. I'm just here to talk in general. When a revaluation happens, last one was 12 years ago, Cheryl? 13 years ago?
No, it was like 2016. It was 5 years ago.
I don't know, I guess. Okay. So, but back, I know we had the one we did, which was, I think it was 2008. We dropped the tax rate to stay revenue neutral. We didn't have a town hall, we didn't have a park, just, I don't even know if we had a deputy then, I don't think so. So, made sense, save taxpayers money. I'm not one to go around saying let's raise taxes and go build whatever. I think what I've done in the past, pretty much for the town hall and the park, and we did things in moderation. We spent what we had. We didn't go into debt. I get all that, and that's what we should be doing. And that's what you guys have been doing, so I appreciate what you're doing. I would say, though, in retrospect, which I generally don't look backwards, but in this instance, when we were going to build a town hall in its park, you take on maintenance. You take on keeping those assets valuable and up to par. The same can be true with the deputy. The deputy's costs go up every couple of years. I would be generous. And so you need to keep those in mind. In addition, I think we've been upping our reserves. So what looks like a lot of money in the bank isn't necessarily a lot of money in the bank, because some of that's reserves that you need to keep and not use. So I appreciate all of that. My point is, when you're looking at the current rate and trying to stay revenue neutral by dropping it because the valuation of people's properties, so their taxes were going up unless you reduce the rate. The Wesley Chapel's tax is one of the lowest in the county. As I say, back in 2008, I think 11 of the 13 municipalities kept their rates the same. So they got a net tax increase. I'm not trying to disguise anything here at all. In this instance, we did not. We were one. I think Price Mill was the other one. I remember right, Cheryl?
Price Mills or subdivision? You mean Lake Park? Do you mean Lake Park?
Lake Park, thank you. Lake Park.
I don't know. I can't remember.
It was Lake Park. Thank you. That's what it was. I gotta look at. Sorry, I shouldn't be addressing the finance person directly. Sorry about that. But so all I ask, I'm not saying don't drop it. Just think about it. Think about what makes sense in lines of keeping things up to speed. Parking lot out here, for instance, we did the one at the park. This one is in dire need in the entryway. It's all breaking up, and if we let it go too much further, you're going to have a bigger repair job. So just keep things like that in mind as you're going through the discussion. If it's instead of dropping it to, I think you're going to be about 4 cents, if I remember correct, 0.4%, something close to that. Maybe do 0.3% drop or 0.2%. But it's just a suggestion. It's, as I say, in retrospect, I was second guessed on that several times once we got to discussing building the town hall in the park, and not everybody got every what they wanted to begin with, and that's fine. Same thing we do every year. But now you've got these things, these assets we want to keep up. Thank you. I apologize, I wouldn't have to one.
Thank you, John. And then we have Mr. Jim Hill. If you'll approach the podium and state your name and address, please.
Thank you. My name is Jim Hill. I am a very new resident of Wesley Chapel. I haven't actually moved in yet. We're closing on Wednesday.
What's your address?
2314 Wesley Landing Road, which is in courtyards at Wesley Chapel.
Okay.
Which I assume is Wesley Chapel. They keep telling us our mailing address is Waxhaw, and I don't get that, but
the lines are all different.
The lines are, but
there's the fire district lines, there's the postal lines, there's the school district lines, there's
But on our deed it says Wesley Chapel, so that's fine. That's why I'm here. So my wife and I are moving here from Naperville, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. I'm a retired corporate finance executive. So in Naperville, I for the last 10, 12 years, I was a volunteer on a number of city initiatives, task forces, committees. I worked on. Well, and that's part of why I'm here, because I worked on committees for seniors. I worked on land use committee. I worked on budget committees. Like I said, my background is finance, so I'm very anxious to. I've always believed that involved in municipal government because you guys set the tax rates and you keep the streets and stuff like that. So you have my contact info. I'll be happy to meet with you individually or collectively, to talk about how I can help. So I just had two questions about the budget. So one was, again, I knew, but I thought I saw a passing reference on the news to a lawsuit between Verizon and the village regarding a cell phone tower. And so I looked at the budget and I see $28,000 in legal expenses, and I have to raise the question: is, given that that lawsuit is that sufficient? How might big pardon? So I just bring that up to say, how is that going to affect the budget? And then I think the gentleman earlier mentioned reserves. One of the things that I worked on with the city of Naperville was a reserve policy for different funds. I'm very familiar with municipal fund accounting and techniques and things like that. So, and just for frame of reference, the city of Naperville budget is about $450 million divided into interest. But one of the things that we worked on was a reserve policy. And engaged consultants and got recommendations on how much reserves, cash reserves, a municipality should have. And you can relate it to your own personal every personal financial advisor says you should have 6 months reserve, right? What does that mean? You look at your expenses and you have 6 months in the bank. So when I look at this budget, if I'm reading it correctly, you don't have 6 months, you actually have 2 years. Because you have about $1.5 million in reserve and a $750,000 budget. So that raises the question of what's the justification? That's a significant amount. And as a taxpayer, you want reserves, but you don't want excess reserves. So I just raised the question of what's the rationale for 2 years of operating expense reserve. What's that? Well, it's a serious question because as a tax, it's just like I'll fight the same battle with my homeowners association. They have reserves, and I'm paying into that reserve, and I'm happy to pay for it if there's a purpose for it. But again, when I see $1.5 million in unrestricted in your budget, my budget now, $1.5 million in unrestricted funds, that sort of raises the red flag that says, is that really necessary?
You gonna stick around?
Yeah.
Okay. We might answer some of those questions.
I'll reach out to you tomorrow.
Okay.
About our. Okay, so.
John's got some of them.
Yes, sir.
Can I just make one comment?
Come on to the very good, sir.
So it's related to the budget, kind of. If you recall, council had deferred any decision on a go-ahead for the proposed flagpole project, pending us figuring out how we would get the flag lowered and raised or not. In the budget is a part-time employee for the park. Can I then assume that we'll have the part-time employee sometime after Veterans Day, or one way off, therefore have somebody to raise and lower the flag, therefore have councils okay to go ahead with the flagpole project? That's it.
Let us take one step at a time. Let us make sure that we're approving.
Should council approve the budget?
At that point, I think we want to address the flagpole project, but not before.
Okay. Because the guy's been texting me and asking me what's going on, and I said, hopefully we'll get some decisions tonight.
Any further comments for the public hearing? We will circle back to a decision later. So I'll close the public hearing for the proposed 20.
Do you want me to make any comments?
Would you like to make some comments? Or you would love to have your comments before I close?
Okay. Since this was a rebudgeting year, and we had a revaluation back in I think it was 2008, and again in 2015 or 16, and in the 2015 values actually decreased because the economy had been bad. But we did go with revenue neutral in the past, and the budget, I have a spreadsheet from the state treasurer's office that we go through, and it accounts for the normal growth. We do have annexations most years, and it accounts for the normal growth of income, and then it comes up with what would be a revenue neutral rate, which simply means you're not raising taxes on people. That's all it means. You are shifting taxes somewhat, because every year they revalue your cars, every year they revalue the public service companies, which is the utility companies in the state, and the state comes and gives that values to the town of what they can tax them on. But it's your houses only gets done every so often, 5 years, 6 years. It depends what the Union County property appraiser comes up with. And so you are getting a shift of taxes from the other kinds of tax, from your car and all, to your home. So even with a revenue neutral rate, you will probably pay more taxes because your house is worth more than your cars, and there is a shift in that direction. So I computed the revenue neutral tax rates, and it came up, our current rate is 1.65 cents, and the revenue neutral rate is 1.29 cents. So we came up with a budget. Since we had our budget meeting, we got a new memo dated June 7th from Union County for the deputy, and they have increased the projected cost of the deputy by 0.6%. So it's about, I think it's like $650. That went up. I also got the amount for our insurance bill, and that's going up about $800. Let's see.
Is that what's up at the park?
No, not necessarily. I think it's overall. It's not broken out real fine tooth. When we were doing our budget meeting and we had salary increases, and you combined the clerk and finance positions, and we applied the percent to it, and when I went back and looked at it, anyway, that amount is decreasing by $268. I had to apply the percent and then multiply it out to get an hourly rate. And then payroll tax, we had started with our prior year payroll taxes, but that included having a full-time planner. So payroll tax is too high, so that is decreasing. So I gave you all copies, and if you look at the copy, I gave you the bold numbers are the numbers that changed. So the appropriated fund balance has decreased from $17,717 to $13,201. The total budget is $684,511. The clerk finance decreased to $75,733. Payroll taxes decreased to $10,510, and the fringe benefits retirement decreased to $11,606. And the law enforcement increased by $626 to $105,747. So I just wanted to explain that had happened.
Cheryl, one question that I think will help answer some of the questions that have been asked.
Mm-hmm.
What is the state mandate percentage that we have to keep in reserve in our reserve account?
Mm-hmm. The state mandates 8%, which is ridiculous. It's very low.
Mandates what?
8% of our revenues and expenditures to reserve.
What is our percentage of?
I think we have 25%, and I'm always advocating 50% because it's likely there are years that we don't get our tax money in until November or December, and our year starts July 1st.
Right.
So
there's a balance there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
8%, I agree. If that's the state mandate, yeah, that's probably too low.
We would be borrowing money.
Seems to be swinging the scale the other direction.
There's a few other things too. We had a sale of land in the last year, and there was a possibility of a potential lawsuit, so we didn't want to spend that money or appropriate it at this time. We're holding on to that until we're sure we don't have to refund it to somebody. And I think the town is probably, it's probably a good time to start thinking about a capital improvement plan rather than, budgeting every last penny and spending it, thinking about what do we want to do. And we've heard from residents that traffic is an issue, and traffic's a very expensive item. Sidewalks, we hear, is people want sidewalks. I saw a recent number in another local town. It was a half a mile for $1 million for sidewalks. So, money can go really fast once you decide to spend it. So I think, to me, it didn't make sense to raise taxes on people. We have had a hard year, and there's some people that have done well through all this pandemic. Other people haven't, and it seemed fair to go with a revenue neutral rate. We're not wanting for money. We do have money, and you can, once you come up with a capital improvement program, you could appropriate fund balance during the year. So that's just some thoughts.
Any more comments before I close the public hearing?
I've got a short one. When this first came up, the first person I went to seek advice on was Brad Horvath, who came up and spoke, because he's not only was the mayor sat in our seats for 12 years, he's been through this exact same thing before, so I thought his opinion carried a lot of weight. It's not a popular decision to raise taxes by any stretch of the imagination for a politician, but sometimes it's needed. I find myself doing not what I want to do, but doing what I've been asked to do. And sitting in the seat, you have to put sometimes your personal opinion aside and do what people would like you to sit here want, instead of what your own personal opinion is. So my vote tonight's going to be based on that, not based on my personal opinion. Because I think that the revenue neutral, considering of all the municipalities that we're looking at, we're the only one staying revenue neutral. Everyone else is going higher, sometimes a lot higher than what they're currently doing, because the cost of everything is going up. The other thing I'd like to point out was that I've spoken with Mark Watson, the county manager, and we were speaking specifically about the tax revaluation of our properties. He's telling us that based on how fast all of our property values are going up, that reevaluation might happen again this year. Not because of any other reason, because it's state mandated. Once your tax value, once your property value goes up a certain percentage, the county is required to do a reassessment. Not that they want to do it. Normally they only do it every 7 years or so. But there are different things that kick off on the assessment, and one of the things is property value growth. And everybody here sitting in this room that already owns a house knows that the property values have gone up 30, maybe 40% over the last 12 months. And that is going to take what we're looking at and duplicating it again by the end of the year. So it is what it is. Don't be shocked when it comes down again.
Any further comments? Okay, I will close this public hearing for the budget and fee schedule. We can talk about fee schedule, that can change. So now, I imagine these will go really quickly because they are not, there's no one signed up. So I'd like to open the public hearing for ordinance amendments to the flood damage prevention ordinance to comply with chapter 160G. So I'll open that public hearing. There's no one signed up. Bob, do you want to talk right now?
Would you like for me to talk about them all at one time?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to be here till 11.
We will, unless there are specific questions about specific changes that have been proposed, I will refrain from going through this in any kind of great detail. So I think some of you have been able to attend planning board meetings where it was discussed in the past. Great.
These are changes that are mandated by North Carolina government to comply with our state statutes.
So, for the benefit of the members of the audience here tonight, who may have not been following this as closely, we have prepared updates to the Village of Wesley Chapel's flood damage prevention subdivision and zoning ordinances due to the adoption in 2019 of a new chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes. This replaces the somewhat different city and county zoning authority that was previously contained in chapters 160A and 153A. It merges them together. So there's more unanimity between the regulations and statutory authorizations between cities and counties. In the review, we identified over 550 total changes across the three ordinances. The volume is mainly due to some changes in nomenclature where repetition just requires lots of changes. We've primarily reviewed the ordinances for changes to comply with 160D. There were a few other things that we did identify that were either, in reading each of them, identified some erroneous references, some errors, redundant, duplicative provisions of the ordinance that were identified during the overall review. A couple things that should have been changed probably 4 or 5 years ago, but just the way the ordinances are structured, it's not always very evident that you need to take something out or add something in. Some of those notable changes that are proposed to comply with statutes include change in terminology from conditional use permit and its derivations in the ordinance to the term special use permit, the elimination of conditional use zoning. So conditional use zoning is no longer part of the ordinance, it'll be just plain conditional zoning. The expansion of explicit conflict of interest requirements, standardization of administrative appeal periods to a period of 30 days, and the extension of the period of validity for zoning permits to 1 year to comply with statutory changes with regard to that. So for anyone that has an existing conditional use permit or a conditional use zoning district, of which there are a number out there, essentially we've inserted a provision, even statutorily it would just change automatically, but we just clarified that in the ordinance that those automatically change to special use permits and general conditional zoning districts. And so the big issue would be that previously, if this was 5 years ago, if you had a previously approved conditional use zoning district, which is both a conditional use permit and a rezoning in one time, then you would have used that same theoretical process to amend it. Now they would go through a legislative conditional zoning amendment if they wanted to further amend their existing conditional use zoning district, because it just automatically changes to a conditional district. The provisions that are already in place stay in place. Any restrictions, what have you, stay in place. But we're mostly just using different nomenclature for the conditional use permits. For the conditional use zoning districts, it is different though, because they just changed to legislative zoning. Let's see. Other notable changes, change some definitions, as we're now required to match North Carolina building code definitions for certain things as mandated by the statutes. There's a new type of administrative subdivision that's mandated by statute. It's not really an exempt subdivision, but it's for very specific cases that allows the administrative use of a subdivision. We can only require a plat, no other review. We updated the ordinance's definitions of exempt subdivisions to match statute. We made sure that we've copied over the statutory prohibition on requiring the burying of electric utilities that are essentially off the site of a subdivision or development parcel, even if they're moved during the development process. And we changed the definitions of manufactured housing to comply with statutory mandate that you can no longer explicitly regulate by age. So regulating by. The proposal is now to regulate by the whether they were built to the standards of HUD's construction safety manufactured home standards, which did not exist before a certain date, but we're not regulating by a date. The date 1976 is no longer in the ordinance. We did have to make some updates to the definitions of dwelling, single-family dwelling, I believe. Because the state building code definition of dwelling is a building containing one or two dwelling units. We made some changes in the ordinance to make sure that a single-family dwelling was still a single dwelling. So most of these updates to each of the three ordinances have to do with process, terminology, nomenclature. It does not affect uses in general, setbacks, lot sizes, aesthetic considerations. I mean, we do have some issues with can't make people bury electric lines. I don't think we're really doing that much here anyway before. So the process for getting to yes changed a little bit, as does the process to getting to no. We did provide you with all of the changes, both in digest form as well as inline edits to the ordinance for your reference. And we have a full version of the ordinance as well. Updated statutory references. Ordinance. It's interesting, the ordinance is actually, despite the large number of changes across all three of them, is in fairly good shape from a statutory compliance standpoint. It's been kept up to date pretty well over time. There's other weird stuff in it that we will get to over time, but it's not, compliance with statute hasn't necessarily been an issue. It's 20 years of different cooks stirring the pot, basically. And that just happens. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions that any of you have, but I won't belabor the point. As we've been.
If anyone ever has trouble sleeping, this is a great document to read. Anybody have any further questions for Ron before we go ahead?
So, I was looking for the page to reference it, but I did see where it eliminated some zoning districts or zoning.
So the conditional use districts that are currently in the ordinance are removed. They are no longer. There's no statutory authorization for them. And so there's a conversion provision in the ordinance now that converts any existing conditional use district to a legislative conditional zoning district.
But everything else still applies.
Everything else.
And then the other one was there was requirements in here now about rules and procedures for planning board in both of the ordinances, I think, and you added about doing the rules and procedure and putting them on the website. And so I just thought that was something we need to have the planning board review those.
They're on the website.
Yeah, they're on the website. Yeah, they're on there. It's a requirement now. It's a state requirement that they be published on a website because they often aren't in many places. They're hard
but
to find.
I didn't know if we needed to have them review them at some frequency.
It's always good to review things like that. There's probably not a whole lot that needs changing. You can always take a look back.
Okay. And I did find it interesting, the 1976 reference going away, because I'm kind of like, well, that was to protect us from electrical changes and other things that could be hazards and whatever.
And that's why we do continue to reference a manufactured home construction safety standard. Apparently North Carolina had one in place before HUD did, which is North Carolina actually has a very robust manufactured housing industry, and at one time had one of the greatest shares besides Utah in the country of manufactured housing. And because I was actually amending somebody else's ordinance a few weeks ago, I saw that 1971 standard, actually one of the town of Forsyth County. And so we will continue to reference a safety standard, and one cannot comply with something that was built before its existence. I didn't make up when that's their fault that it's older than it should be, but we just can't reference an explicit date. I had gotten creative in certain places. Previously, HUD's wind standards have changed over time to make them more resistant, resilient to hurricane-force winds in coastal areas. And so some change I've used even later days, like the 90s. Even mid-90s manufactured homes are pretty old now. And so, of course, we can't do any. The village can't have a regulation that has the effect even of completely excluding manufactured homes from the entire jurisdiction. And so we would definitely accommodate them as they comply with the ordinance. I think land values are generally not consistent with manufactured housing installations around here. But
question on our codification. Does all this now have to be run through the system for codification? Okay, and we have budgeted for that expense.
And we didn't use it this year.
Okay.
We actually increased it a little bit because we knew we had these. Any further questions from all? All right. So I will, any further comments in this public hearing for the ordinance amendments to the flood damage prevention ordinance? And I will close that public hearing. I will open the public hearing for ordinance amendments to the subdivision ordinance to comply with chapter 160D. Do we have any comments or discussion? I will close that public hearing. I will open the public hearing for ordinance amendments to the zoning ordinance to comply with chapter 160D. Any comments or discussion? I will close that public hearing. And then this begins our considering the approval of ordinance 2021-07 to amend the flood damage prevention ordinance to comply with chapter 160D. I make a motion, we approve it.
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? All in favor? I also make a motion that we approve ordinance 2021-08 to amend the subdivision ordinance to comply with chapter 160D.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Then I make a motion, we approve ordinance 2021-09 to amend the zoning ordinance to comply with chapter 160D.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? That gets us to our rules of procedure.
What about the closed session?
Closed session.
Oh, the closed session.
Unless you want to push that further down.
Should we, while our public is here, do you want to discuss the budget fee schedule? All that'll make fun. George stay for a little bit longer. But I'm okay. Are y'all okay staying for a few minutes?
At your pleasure.
I love that.
Trust me, we're paying for them.
You cheat my husband.
I'm telling him.
So I would like for council to discuss adopting the budget fee schedule for 2021. As Cheryl has presented us the amended budget with her numbers, we need to talk about, I guess, revenue neutral. But one thing I would like to say is, Vaughn talked about being free to investigate flood zone complaints without having to constantly come to council. So if we could add something under, can we also make changes to this one?
You can make changes. I want to look at the May budget. We usually have some leeway. I don't really think you need to make a budget amendment.
Okay.
We pay the engineer every month, and some of the things I can bill out to developers, and some things I can't. Generally, and I get to add $25 per hour when I bill it out. So I think you're okay.
What dollar amount does he have to come into before council to get approved?
It's just an investigation, so it's not really.
I'll let Cheryl make that. She has to. I can't hire anybody on your behalf, so Cheryl would have to.
And we've done it for what we just said, the last one was $1,000. But we all were aware of what was going on.
We'll keep you apprised. You know I'm cheap, and I'll keep you apprised. I won't let a lot of money be spent. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start this end, David.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, you go first, and then we put the notes in order.
Sure. I understand that a lot of other municipalities are not going revenue neutral. But I do understand that we have money in our fund balance that can be used. And I do have a couple projects that I hope the village will look at carefully over the next couple of years, including bathrooms at the park. I'm not saying a community center, but bathrooms at the park, and this land right back here. But I don't want to raise taxes. To me, it seems like you're saying I'm going to raise taxes, and then we're going to figure out what to do with the money. Versus we have a plan that is published and well thought out, and whether it's a capital improvement plan or something clearly documented with what we want to do and how we want to spend those funds. So I am happy with what we came up with for being revenue neutral. We are very frugal here, and I'm happy with what we presented. We worked hard on it. It was 4 hours of our lives we can't get back, and that's all I can say.
You want to draw back to me?
Sure.
I felt one, then let me back up for a second. I acquired the operations of another company that is part of our corporation a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know if that's worthy of congratulations or death wish, but doing some investigations, part of this company is very involved in hotel construction. And I looked at 4 different projects, and all 4 of them were the same hotel. But on one of them, someone had misallocated the labor factors, and they were billed what the other 3 were. And when I asked why did we use such a higher rate for the labor factor, they said because it was available. I don't want us to use that same philosophy within Wesley Chapel. I feel like that, as Brad mentioned, I feel like there are probably areas that we need to look at developing a capital improvement plan for. But I think the burden lies on us first to name those, identify those, budget those, just like we've asked John to do many times. But to put that together before we say, yes, the funds are there and available to use. And again, we're not talking about a lot of money, I realize, to stay at revenue neutral versus even staying, at 1.65. But I think the impression that we give our residents, if we do maintain 1.65 or anything above the revenue neutral point, it's going to be viewed as a tax increase. And I do not want to be a member of council that has to explain why.
And just for the audience, it's about $54,000 a year if we don't pay revenue and take the 1.65.
Yes, and I echo back to what both of you said. I do feel like the whole capital improvement plan, and it's something we've asked John with, but I think it's broader than that. It is for the entire village. There's more than Dogwood Park in the village. And as I've said many times, that when we do make investments, we have to account for and budget for the maintenance of those things. And I think we did that. We started looking at some of that. And I don't think we've always done that in the past. And I think that's part of us being disciplined in the process of creating these long-term strategic plans as well as the benefits they're going to bring us and how we're going to pay for them over time. I think that's just incumbent on us and to maintain what we got and have valid reasons for it, and not just because I have money, let me spend it, but to have a real strategy for what we want to do. And I felt really good about what we did for the budget. Like you said, I think we worked hard on it, and from the standpoint of really questioning every line item. Particularly, I started out saying, I don't think we should go revenue neutral. Let's keep it flat. Because I had some concerns we would be able to do some things that I thought were important, particularly like giving our staff much deserved raises. And when we went through it and realized we could do that and be revenue neutral, I thought that was a great accomplishment. And so I do feel like it's there. We always have the opportunity to revisit how we use the fund balance going forward. So it's not like we're stuck anywhere, but I think this is a very fiscally conservative council and one who's very dedicated to doing what's right for the village as an entirety. And so I think the 1.29 and the budget we developed, pretty good work.
Yeah, I'm going to start off by saying that I'm going to vote for the revenue neutral part of this, and it was a tough decision because I went back and forth and spoke to a lot of people about this. For those of you who know or don't know, back in 2014 we opened this building and the community park, both on the same year, without ever going into the red. We've never been in the red as a village of Wesley Chapel. Thanks to previous councils, Brad Horvath that was up here earlier, and I'm proud of that. We've been pinching pennies, literally. We're talking about a fraction of a penny here to stay revenue neutral. We've been working on a shoestring budget since the village was formed. So I think that says a lot for what we do compared to what some of the other municipalities do. And even though I've got a list here of every other municipality going above revenue neutral, doesn't necessarily mean we should. And it sounds to me like the people that elected us and put us in these chairs do not want us to raise taxes, even if it's only $14 and some change per household. So I'm going to stay revenue neutral with everybody else.
I do have one other comment. When we did the survey as part of the comprehensive plan, there were a number of items in there. We asked residents, hey, are you in favor of this, and would you be willing to do a tax increase? And there were a few items that people said, yes, I would be willing to pay for that. But that was just a generic question to get a sense of where people are at. It's great to know people are willing to pay for it. It doesn't mean we should go raise taxes just because people said they're willing to pay for it. We have to have the thing first. So I do think that's important to tie that back into the survey results we had, is that people are willing to support when we can provide more services, but it wasn't an open, yes, please raise our taxes.
I do think Brad brought up one valid point about the cost of the prepayment of the parking lot, which should have probably been done at the same time as the park because they were both laid at the same time. I don't know if we have an idea of ballpark what that would cost us, but we may have to break into contingency to do that.
When he said that, I was kind of like, why did we stop? I remember we ran into scheduling issues and everything else, but I was kind of.
I thought right after we were done with the park, we were going to turn around and get quotes for doing the parking lot here as well. So, what do we end up spending on the park, Cheryl?
$10,000.
Yeah. So.
But do you mean just our parking lot, or are you talking about the entrance drive? Because we only own half of that.
I understand.
That would involve negotiations with Aston.
Well, I'd be happy with just doing the parking lot, which is starting, like Brad said, starting to break down because it's the same age as the other things that we've had to reseal. So as long as we understand that if we approve this budget, we may have to fall into contingency if that ends up being something we choose to do.
I don't think that gives us time to develop a clear, defined plan of what needs to be done.
I think
How much money do we need to get that done?
Good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar, which I think we have been.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to
one question, I'm sorry, I'll second the motion and then ask a question. The bold items that you changed, do you have a net increase or decrease after that? There was only a couple.
Right. Well, it would be, we were at 689,027. Now we're at, is that right?
Okay.
Yeah, and now we're at 684,511, so. Yeah, I I don't want to add it. Dean put on the spot, I'll do it wrong.
No, that's all right. 1% is close enough.
It's a small change.
Thank you, Cheryl.
All right, so any further discussion? All in favor? All right, so thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to go into a closed session for NC statute.
I don't think
For legal.
143-318.11A2.
Need to make a motion. Somebody needs to make a motion.
Okay, great. She made the motion, I'll second. Ron, you staying? No? No. Okay.
That's easy. That's easy. We can just stay.
Hey, John, tell them about the great weather, tell them about the low crime, tell them about the... So motion, provided we can stay in here and just close the door.
Yeah.
I need a motion to come out of closed. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
No motions related to the closed session.
Amendments to your procedure, there's a few administrative changes we're going to make, so I just say we postpone that until next month. If you have any feedback for me, if not, I'll try to get Cheryl, I'll try to get Corey for our next meeting. The Western Union.
Technically, I've got a Humane Society meeting scheduled before our next meeting. Can we have that?
I think, is that in the reopening? First page.
I thought that was part of this.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've confused this with the rules and procedures, not
That's
not
not on the
reopening. I'm sorry.
agenda. But we do have an agenda item for an update on American Rescue Plan that we then added to the agenda.
Sure. So we can kind of
Second page.
swirl it in there, right?
Yeah, we'll swirl.
Yeah, okay. So, the Western Union Municipal Alliance update, we will be meeting here in June. The last meeting was very short. It was kind of, Weddington and Marvin are not planning to collaborate with American Rescue last time. Mineral Springs is not. They were a no, but now they're kind of unsure.
Mineral Springs a no, and who else?
Weddington and Marvin were a no. Mineral Springs was a no, but then Rick called me later and said, well, maybe we should. We don't know. So everybody's just kind of whatever. Apparently everybody is very frustrated because other representatives are saying, going around saying we're getting $2 million. And that has since been proven to not be the case, but people are believing that we're getting $2 million still, which is ridiculous.
Even the county, I talked with Mark Watson before, since our last meeting, and he's like, we're still having meetings talking about how much and what we can use it on, and we don't know yet. And the meeting we're having next week still won't tell us. I'm like, well, what are you talking about then? The only two questions I would have is, how much are we getting? What can we spend it on? Other than that, the rest of the meetings are pointless.
So I will say that I did get an email from a resident asking if they had seen the RFP that Weddington and Marvin, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but they had seen the RFP and they wanted to know if we couldn't ask to join. And I said that municipal tax collection is a long and detailed process and that Marvin and Weddington have been doing it They had been involved in this process for over a year. That Wesley Chapel kind of is a low cost, low tax, low service town. Part of our problem is our borders, and that, we're kind of like, and then Marvin wants to get involved, so they're actually owning some of their roads, over more of their roads, so it makes more sense for them to kind of take over municipal trash collection. And they did not reply. I told them at this time Wesley Chapel was not pursuing municipal trash collection, but that I had told Weddington and Marvin I look forward to learning from their experience going through this fun thing.
That's a good point. How would you handle it in Wesley Oaks when in, out?
Well, this resident actually lives in Silver Creek, and I said, half of your neighborhood is, and half is not, and how do you...
Yeah.
You're still going to have 6 trash trucks, and I advise them to reach out to their HOA to consolidate to one company because of your...
The solution to this in a microcosm came out of Silver Creek, and it can't be done. Because originally Silver Creek was all one trash company, I think it was God Bless USA, and they got a contract, I think, over at Indian Trail, and they started treating us poorly to the point that they weren't picking up our trash 1 or 2 days after our scheduled day, and it's trash. So about a third of the residents in the neighborhood said, I'm not using this company anymore, and we went with some other country, like Trinity or one of the other trash companies. And Trinity was better, it was better at the same price, but it was better service, blah, blah, blah. And then Trinity started doing bad, and then there was a third company that came in. And everyone in my neighborhood either loves this company or hates that company, and the last thing they want to be told is, you have to use this only one company in Silver Creek, because they're like, I won't do it, because they burned me so many times in the past.
And that's the exact same thing in First.
So the long and the short of it is, if you can't force that down to the residents' throat. We're only talking about trash service. I went to our HOA meeting and I said, look, one of the trash companies approached me and said, if you can get everybody in this neighborhood to just use one company, we'll cut your trash cost in half. Instead of $30 a quarter, it'd be $15 a quarter, but I got to get everybody in this neighborhood, 143 houses, all to agree to this one service. Could not do it. So that in a microcosm would be the same for Wesley Chapel.
Okay, that was an interesting email to get, but they didn't respond, so hopefully they liked it. The update on the American Rescue Plan Act.
What about Labella?
Oh, shoot. Yeah, 20B, review Labella. Did you have a comment there?
Just one other thing in regards to WUMA.
Yeah.
Was it Joe that spoke about they're investigating using bond or raising bond monies to help pay for some of the road repairs, and the DOT said that
They were interested in it. They were interested in saying, we have the money, we can go ahead and do it. And apparently somebody else said, we have the money and gave them. So I don't think...
Really? Wow.
I think it was so. So I think they kind of not. But there was some discussion at one of the probably examples in the recent past. It was kind of like if you have a town that has the money, if they could just go out and do some of their own money and then tell DOT, put it up on the list. You know, to use that way to get around the list for everybody else that can do it. And there was discussion on that one. It's not fair, you know, you got to have a process, some equity, and everything else. So that was one way. I'm going to like, well, I have the money, I'll just go do it, and then have someone go, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. So, I think everybody aims at every which way they can. Just to review. And Marvin's upset too, because that one roundabout that they're going to have, their next roundabout, DOT keeps increasing the price. So like now they're up to paying like $600,000, and every time they increase that.
So now we've been trying to put out this ongoing check with DOT for a roundabout?
Yes, but we're on the list, we're on the short list, and we got the
the extra funding, and if there's a shortfall, we can go.
I will tell you, the moment the news of that roundabout hit, people lost their mind and were like, why not fire department? So at least we were able to say, we have paid our funds.
We wrote them a blank check, and they still haven't done it.
That's another stuff. This came up with,
What about Labella?
Oh, okay, Labella. We have a new agreement with Labella for their professional services. It's pretty standard out. I think it's the same, right?
They just raised rates.
So I guess I just need a motion that we can re-enter into a professional services agreement with Labella for engineering services.
I think they're just $5 an hour for each level, but that's all it is.
That's how much they went up.
Mhm.
I'll make the motion that we accept the Labella Engineering Services Agreement.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, then the CDBG block grant. So we approved the letter of intent to join, but now there is actually like the application for the formal. Basically, we're coming to the table to help our neighbors. So,
I was a little concerned I think it was on the second page. You know, anytime you touch federal money, you have to, pledge all kinds of things, and it referenced a couple of policies that we do not have. It said, the town agrees to have this policy, and we don't have that policy.
It's still helping me. We're at a closed session, so.
you did email George about that. I saw that.
Yeah.
But if we're not actually collecting the money,
I don't know.
but if we actually don't receive any funds, we'll just sit down at the table and talk about how they use it.
I think that's a distinction we need to understand. It sounded like we were supporting this initiative. It's a good thing to do for our neighbors and everything else. But if it puts obligations on us, we can't use it. I think that's a different situation. But I also thought somebody in the village actually benefited from this.
We have had residents who have benefited from the meal service.
Do they benefit? I mean, they obviously did benefit, even though we weren't part of it. So.
So if George blesses that letter, are y'all okay with us submitting it?
Yes.
Do we need a motion, Sharon?
I would think.
I make a motion that upon legal approval, that we vote to accept the CDBG grant as support
To support George on
the joining.
Second.
then
Cheryl, thank you for pointing out the implications.
she always keeps you honest. Special events ordinance, this came up in my talks with Champion Forest because, they had that outdoor event in the afternoon on a Sunday, and there were all kinds of complaints about noise after, although they say they finished at 8. I don't know, the back and forth is exhausting. But in talking with Vaughn, he thought that maybe we should do a special events ordinance that wouldn't be applicable to just one place. It would be applicable to the whole village. So if anybody was doing a special, and we could decide the threshold, but if an event was going to generate X amount of traffic or whatever our parameters are, then they're required to mediate traffic. They're required to whatever it is we tell them. And when I was talking to the off-duty police captain, lieutenant, whoever he is, he did say that the county is like, just like we adopted the county's noise ordinance, they're looking into a special events ordinance. But I think that it might help us if we go ahead and start to look into our own. And I guess we would task planning board with starting that process.
I guess the question by definition, if, for example, WCWAA has events every Saturday, they have soccer game, whatever the sport is. If they do it every Saturday, they always have a police officer out there directing traffic. Is that considered a special event, or is that a normal event? And does that fall under what this is guideline might be? Churches have events all the time. I think the question is it's traffic related, is that correct?
They're not us, right?
No,
So
they're
we
not,
don't
but I'm
worry
just,
about
I'm just using that as an example, whether it's a church, a school.
That's good.
This is an ordinance, but what is it? Is it really appropriate for the planning board to do it, not to do that, and what the enforcement should be? Because I was thinking recently there was another ordinance that we talked about, and John was like, well, it's not really within what we do, which I can't remember which one it was. Kind of like, why would we do that? Doesn't have anything to do with planning and zoning.
It's almost a traffic ordinance, not necessarily a special events
I
ordinance.
just question if planning board is appropriate. I definitely support doing something, and I think I'm starting to do something, even if it's later than another document in county, which maybe I'll see that when we just have to there, it would be great.
How,
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna ask for, how far away do you think the county is to the church?
do you want me to research that and come back to that?
I would much rather blame the county than blame us.
There you go.
But I do think that it's really important, because also when I think about these things, they apply to us because we have a park. And so if we can be out there demonstrating, role modeling, hey, these things are important, this is what we're doing, and we're doing the very same thing we're asking you to do. But it is going to take some work.
Well, we're approving, well, you know, it's RA 40 and there's all these thoughts that could generate from events. That is good.
A wedding could generate.
Yeah.
I mean, is a wedding a special event, or is it?
I think they would say yes. Unless you are a wedding
And then-
venue and you do it every day.
Well, exactly. And then the follow-up to that would be, if somebody does it, they don't follow the ordinance, that, well, I didn't know. We were just having a wedding at my house. I didn't know 200 people were going to show up. I didn't know I had to apply for this or that or the other. It's like when we had the ice cream guy come through our neighborhood when we were doing business licenses in Wesley Chapel. And he was like, I didn't know I needed an ordinance to sell ice cream, you know, out of the back of my truck in Wesley Chapel. I'm like, well, what do you do? And I think we charged him $30 or something.
Well, I will research with the county and I'll get back to John July.
Because I mean, it would be great that we don't have to do the legwork to do one, but I do think that when, you know, because they come like the churches, what about schools?
And they did say it would be driven because they are the sheriff's department.
I would much rather say if we get a complaint, I'd rather direct them to the county than direct them to us.
Because most times they're gonna contact the county anyway. I mean,
Bingo.
Great point. And then an update on the American Rescue. Which I guess the update is the call is Wednesday, Sharon?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then reopening town hall.
We've got the Western Union Alliance meeting here. We've got community meetings, communications, parks and rec, planning board, council. And we've adopted the new signs that if you're not vaccinated, you have to social distance or wear a mask. We didn't do anything above and beyond that. I'm good with those changes.
And that leads us to council comments.
Sure. To Mike's point earlier, the produce section is generally where I get called, Mike.
Yeah, me too. I don't know why it's always produce.
And there's two factors that always come, or two questions that are always raised. Roads and traffic, and mostly roads, the conditions on the roads, especially right here. And what's going on over there at 201 Central? Are there better ways that we as a village can communicate not only plans that are in place for roads, but also what our limitations are with roads, and also maybe be a little bit. Are there any way? I guess what I'm asking is, are there ways that we can better communicate about the two things that I always seem to be asked about?
I think we should have a tab on our webpage that says gossip. And then it talks about all the things that we don't really have control over, but we know about. Because when people corner me all the time, I don't want to steal your time, but it's, well, I got a problem with the roads. Well, that's the Department of Transportation. Oh, I got a problem with schools. That's the Board of Education. I got a problem with the Sheriff's Department. Well, that's the county sheriff. We don't control any of that stuff.
When you asked me about the tax rates, I first made that copy, but then I was trying to get an update, so I went to I think the first town was Fairview, actually. And when I went to their website, I saw something and I thought it was sort of interesting, Amanda. On the left, it had like comments from the mayor and, like some of these bills that have been coming up in the legislature. And I didn't click on them and go to it, but it looked like an opening. Something like that we could put out to the Sunshine List real easily, or we could even put it on our website. I think that's a good point. Well, I wouldn't call it gossip, but just, did you know, kind of things.
I do think there's a lot of tidbits
Yeah.
that we can put up. And I do think we have to think about the website, because it's not just throw anything out there. There has to be a purpose and an organization to it, where people know, hey, if I kind of want to know what's going on around here, this I can always find. Like you said, on their website, it's on the left side, and it's this little block, or whatever. Instead of just in a long list.
Burning question.
And I don't think people really go to our website just to, let me find out what's happening. But when they get the email, and I mean, not everyone does that, but it's increasing, but at least that gets it out to 500 and something people.
Cheryl, they do go to social media, though.
Oh, and social, no, I'm not discounting social media. No, definitely social media, too.
Anything we do on one, we can do on all of them.
Right, and we do.
Just so we get some people somewhere.
Just so this is a burning topic for you. We are hopefully, I didn't ask my friend about it tonight, hopefully we're getting a drive-through Starbucks behind her. Fingers crossed. They're working on the plan, but Aston is in talks, I guess, to put in a Starbucks.
I was told that lot, are you talking between the back of Target and Harris Teeter?
Yeah.
That little square?
That little big piece.
Some of that little square didn't belong to the shopping center. It was owned by somebody else.
Oh, well, they must have sold it.
It was owned by Fifth Third, yeah.
So I guess or they're in the process of selling Starbucks. I'm not sure.
But I just think about the traffic.
It's always already one of the worst.
It's horrible right there.
It's one of the worst intersections right there. Do we have any ability to put like a right turn only or right in, right out, just so that?
I don't know if it'll be. I don't know where
Yeah,
they
like
get
it's
it.
next to or something because of it. I mean, it's gonna be another change right
It is going to be horrible.
It's already horrible. There's accidents there on a regular basis. You should put a Starbucks in that little corner. This is going to make it worse.
And now you're closing the road and you're going to have more traffic coming.
You'll never be able to make a left turn. When I was coming in here tonight, come up to me every time I make my left turn in to come over. There's two cars sitting there trying to go left, and I'm just like left. Really? You really think you're going to get to go left here?
Go to what?
Yeah. I can ask Vaughn for an update. I don't know that they'll know anything about traffic until they have their site plan approved. And know where
But I just didn't know because what the shopping center been approved, if it was an addition like that, got another.
I guess if it's not part of the shopping center. Is it part of the shopping center?
Yeah, it would be part of the shopping center. He was telling me a little bit earlier that it's subject to the rules of the shopping center, and so it would be allowed. It would be a use by right.
And businesses go in there, that's going to increase the traffic in the shopping center regardless. And that's already part of their conditional use permit, so there's not a whole lot we can say or do about it. But that intersection.
We've heard a lot of different people over the last few years. For one time, we heard like a white tablecloth Italian restaurant. And, that sounded appealing, and at least people would stay for a while. They wouldn't be in and out running, But and I mean, Fifth Third came in 3 times probably over the years.
I wonder how Dunkin' Donuts feels about. There's already a Starbucks in Target now.
That's why I was really surprised.
But there's a CVS and Target and a CVS right outside.
But this will be a drive-through. But the traffic.
True.
The other thing too is a resident reached out about farmers market, stable show. They wanted to know if we would rent them land behind town hall. I told them that that land had not been graded. If they were looking to do something on a Saturday, they could ask council about using the parking lot, but they want something more like a year-round, everyday thing, kind of like the Providence Produce Market. I told them to reach out to Aston. They were under the assumption we owned the land all the way up to PetSmart, which is not the case. And I told them that there's no access to our land. It's not graded. There was some talk a while back, but that there's also hopefully plans for that land one day. And I wasn't sure at this time that council would want to do that they should probably start their talks with Aston, or if farmers market can go and rely, and there are other OI parcels.
Can it go on RA 42?
Probably. So
It was in there, yeah.
there's a big OA parcel over here that they could approach. So they were going to keep doing their research and get back to me.
For those of you who don't know the history, Bill Rodriguez pushed for this really hard probably years ago, and it got to the point where the farmer's market was right outside of Cheryl's office. It consisted of 3 pickup trucks or 3 tents. We supplied the electricity, the tables, the chairs, the tents, the bathrooms, and the advertising, banners and ads in the paper, and we didn't charge the vendors anything. So it was all us paying for everything. They got to keep the profits. We got nothing, and it only lasted 3 months.
Quite honestly, the hardest part was, whatever thoughts you have, our mayor at the time, David Caphammer, had to be here at 6 o'clock every Saturday morning because Bill Rodriguez couldn't do it.
Yeah, Bill wanted the farmer's market, but he wasn't going to be here to open the town hall to make sure they had access to bathrooms and electricity and chairs and tents and tables and everything else like that. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. So then the follow-up to that was there was an idea of doing the same farmer's market, but doing it at the park because you've got bathrooms there, you've got electricity there, you've already got the traffic flow on a Saturday through the park. Just allocating some space each Saturday there, but that never came to fruition. So those are the 2 things that we should at least be aware of as we enter into that conversation.
And Aston's got plenty of land, and they've done the Christmas tree farm. I think they did a produce stand one time, so maybe they'd be willing to do some. We don't want them.
And I thought LI said you couldn't have retail. And when the farmer's market be considered retail?
I don't know. We need to check that table uses is real important.
But I mean, if we're saying no retail, then nothing should be on the table of uses that is like retail.
Mm-hmm. Also, you have to be careful. I don't know. I have to look in the farmer's market, but there were some rules that farmer's market was whatever like you grow on your own property, not what you go to Columbia and buy from a wholesaler and bring up and sell.
That was a big issue last time they talked about the produce stands that were being marketed. You would think that tomatoes and everything that you pick at the produce stand were grown there. Well, no. Some of the stuff that they were selling was not grown on that property, and that created some riddles.
You planted farms and strawberries. They were there. We bought them, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is great. It's like, where's stuff coming from? Oh, not around here.
Well, one of them was selling like bananas and.
Yeah.
You throw bananas in North Carolina?
So my last public comment, and then I'll let y'all turn, is next week I'm presenting to the Chamber of Commerce. for a municipal update. Should be interesting. I'm gonna give that same presentation I gave at the county, I'm just gonna try to update it.
Just you and the Lake Park. Mayor.
I'm just gonna try to update it a little bit.
Push that we're revenue neutral.
Can you do that?
Just kind of comment on something you said earlier, like we're talking about these table of uses and everything else. I do think it's one thing when we're looking at them and we're reading them and conceptually, it's like, oh, that sounds good. But I really do think having a real use case, well, what about this and what about that, as we're going through and evaluating, like almost line by line, what could that entail? It's something we got to start thinking about these, you know, like the conservation subdivision. What bothered me about McCoy Farms was the fact that they put their piece with all the buffer, not where their houses were already existing, but where there were no houses. So they did nothing to protect the existing houses with that had the buffer. They just were like, yeah. And like, that wouldn't have been my intent. My intent was then you can come in and protect against everyone else that's surrounding that one. The RA40, looking at these big wide table of uses, and we can set it there, and we can put little X's and little C's and everything else. But I think sometimes if they just get to unintended consequences to them. And so I would just encourage us to really, even if we have to say, we just need to take one at a time and revisit the table of uses. Yeah.
I'm going to come back and sit down. I'm going to stand here. My back's killing me. One of the things I forgot to bring up in the Parks and Rec Committee report, since we were so focused on the event, we've agreed to hire a part-time person. Is everybody okay if we go ahead and start looking for that person, even though we can't start paying them until July?
Can we ask John to come up with a list of duties and responsibilities?
Okay. I think after the event, which in our next Parks and Rec meeting is a few days after the event, we'll have to solidify that. But I would like somebody to start as soon as possible. And since it's already mid-June, I'd like to look at that. One of the things I'm looking at, I don't know if John's considered it, but we have this weekly meeting of all Parks and Rec people. John doesn't attend, I attend at his place. They've got part-time people there that are looking for full-time. So the thought process was get a part-timer from like Waxhaw, who's only getting part-time hours, plus part-time hours here, let them combine and get a full-time job, getting 2 part-times without any benefits. So
as long as they can, you know, work across our special things like raising the lower flags at random ad hoc days.
Yeah, I know that's the right point.
We might also want to check on the retirement system. I don't know how they would view that if essentially you have 2 towns that are in the retirement system and they're getting 20 hours here and 19 here, but they're not in the retirement system. Just a simple question.
Yeah, that's a good one to check.
The other question I had was, is everybody going to come to the event on Saturday? Okay. Just wanted to know what the...
I get off work, I'm working 8 to 2, so I can come.
Okay.
And you're singing at 3. I usually be here, so I can't sing until about 5.
I also wanted to see if there was any update on this House Bill 496 on trees.
Bond sent our tree save ornaments resolution to someone.
I did.
Or Cheryl did.
Yeah. There's a couple things going on. Brandy Deese, who's the planning director in Indian Trail, was collecting them, and I had sent it to her. And then somebody from the Planners Association was collecting, and I'm sure she was working with him also. And I think I sent it to him too, but I told them I had sent it to Brandy also.
Is the Western Union Alliance or anybody at the county level kind of organizing everybody and spearheading this, or is each one doing it independently?
I think everybody did it individually, and I don't know what the county did.
Could you make that a topic of discussion at your next meeting? Sure. I think it would be, again, the main reason is get together and talk with one voice versus this extreme argument.
Based on one of the sessions I went to from the league, one of together, we're one voice. Individually, we still have to put it out there.
Well,
Otherwise, it looks like one is saying versus five.
As a comparison, when we go to the road commission meetings, and we're all independent, we weren't even all voting the same way.
No, what I'm saying is they were very much about, these are the number of cities that we're talking about, the volume. And so for these really important things, I don't think we want to say, yeah, we're going to set the thing, so we don't have to do anything. We're just saying, in addition to that's all.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of concern about that. There's a lot of concern about a lot of bills.
Is everybody banding together to fight it, or some people are just, I don't care, whatever the state does, the state does?
Everybody's good.
Okay, so there's going to be resolutions and...
People are already on for this different
The other thing I'd like the Western Alliance to push for is this, we had a meeting once before with Senator Todd Johnson, as a collective group, asking to come together again for another group meeting, because that's what he said he was going to do. Now, he can use COVID as an excuse, or he can use time as an excuse, but I would really like to see us to get together and have another meeting with him before he goes back to Raleigh to represent us. I think he should talk to us before he can represent us at the state level. I think everybody, all the different municipalities that were at that meeting last time would agree. He was basically asking us for marching orders, and then he said there would be a follow-up to that meeting. That was 2 years ago.
At least.
And haven't seen anything since. So,
Okay, I can do that.
thank you. Motion to adjourn?